The following program features language some listeners may find offensive. Listener discretion is advised.
For me, I was never a battle DJ. So my battle, if you want to call it that, or my part of like come battle me like this then, which nobody could ever do as far as I'm concerned. And if they can, I'll shout out to you all now who's listening to this now. If any of you can do what I did within Goatboy and Headcase with the records, flipping 15 records in a matter of 1 minute on a stage, well, I had to pick like 7 breaks off one record and I had 15 records. So what's that? 78 breaks? Yo, this is Dek Masha Slicer Man. Speaking on the Hip Hop Cymru Wales podcast with my man Luke here, and we're going to be running through some deep Welsh hip hop history shit.
You are listening to Hip Hop Cymru Wales, a podcast exploring the trails and untold tales of Welsh hip hop. My name is Lloyd Bailey and I'm a podcaster, best known for the Fly Fidelity podcast, and I'm talking to key players about the notable and nuanced evolution of Welsh hip hop history.
Stop on my man who gon' rock a jam. Dedicate this to all Welsh DJs. Take it back to brass knucks and blast those. Must be a bar for every nebulous love. Yellow brick days of Welsh heritage. Don't mess with the wicked. Smash down the walls, the revolution's coming at you. We rolled into town with mics in our holster. Captain of our ship, with a master of our fate. With a dream to succeed where most men fail. Rock stars, bars, hard and Belushi flesh. As soon as I hit the stage, my presence is felt. You wanna rock up on my mic, I'll bang ya. Vanilla story ever told for me. From the land of the mythical dragon hearts. Gritty, my life story.
Welcome to the program. This episode, we're joined by former member of Headcase Ladz and Goatboy, producer and turntablist Dek Masha Slicer Man is with us for an intimate conversation in which we delve into his legacy and one-of-a-kind stories. Enjoy the conversation.
This is Slicer with aka Slicer Man or Dek Masha Slicer Man from Swansea, Wales. My earliest recollections would have been Dougie Fresh and the electros in the context of hip hop music. But my first contribution, I guess, without knowing it really, because to me, it wasn't part of hip hop really, at least, in the context of what hip hop is or what we later found it out to be, the 4 elements, 5 elements, etc. Right. Was tagging, graffiti. I didn't do burners when I started out, but I was tagging. So that would be my first recollection of what hip hop was. But like I said, to me at that time, it wasn't hip hop. It was just me tagging, doing graffiti. Then when the music came about, Dougie Fresh, electros, all that sort of stuff, which I think was about 84, was it? Or around about that time. Was where we started to get a bit of a better understanding of what actually hip hop was, or actually just you hearing the term, because obviously hip hop came from the army thing, didn't it? It's hip hop. So we didn't really hear about that at first, in those early days, or even call it hip hop that I remember. It was a bit later. It was more mid 80s, late 80s that. Or mid to late 80s that the term hip hop came to us, as in the meaning of it, sort of thing.
So how old were you at this point and where were you living?
Tag wise, I grew up up until about age 10 in a place called Penlan, which, anyone from Swansea even to this day, considers it the kind of Bronx of Swansea, you know. It's more Bronx now than it was when I was younger. Actually, it wasn't too bad back then. But
take me into that timeline back then. Describe that atmosphere. What was that like as a growing period during that time for you?
Well, I think the school had a big part of who we were with myself and a lot of. Well, I say a lot of people in Swansea because it was different schools, but myself and a lot of the crews that I knew later on, or through the immediate interaction with hip hop, because we went to an all boys school which had 1,800 pupils, and they were all selected from the craziest areas of Swansea. So, like, you know, I couldn't have said this to you back then, obviously, but now, looking back, I think the fundamental basis of that roughness contributed to us, because hip hop as well was a little bit rebellious, you know, to me anyway, you know, certainly the graffiti side of it. Well, absolutely the graffiti side of it, because, you know, all the early graph stuff was illegal, you know, you weren't meant to tag, you know, bus stops and fucking trains and all this sort of stuff. So the rebellious side of it, it definitely came from that, from the schooling, you know, because of being in an all boys school where every rough area of Swansea was put in that school. Basically, it was the only school, literally the only school in Swansea that had all boys, and it was the only school in Swansea that was chosen rough areas to put these boys in, you know. So it was a rough school, like, but it kind of, you know, it made us who we were at the end of the day. So rebelliousness, graffiti, after hours, I'm going to put it sort of like youth clubs and stuff like that. That's where the breaking came about, and we started witnessing people breakdancing and stuff when the electro started to arise and all that. So my first musical experience would have been, at least visually, would have been Dougie Fresh and stuff, you know, on Top of the Pops and all that stuff, which I think was about 84. So I went to Penlan School 83. I moved from Penlan, even though I still went to Penlan School, I moved from Penlan, living in Penlan, to a place called Forest Fach, which was, you know, because Swansea's not a big city, it wasn't really far away from Penlan. It was probably, I don't know, 3-4 miles away from Penlan, in a place called Forest Fach, which was the edge of the green belt. And it was like you had the river and the woods and everything right there on one side, and then on the other side you had all factories, which is where we used to do a lot of our graffiti and stuff. So kind of for me, it was the best of both worlds. I had the greenness in me, if you like, the hippie, you know, or the future hippie to be, and right. And then the rebelliousness side of the factories where we do the climbing and you know, the graffiti and whatnot. So they were my earliest memories. Definitely the youth clubs, school, because from the youth clubs into our all boys school, breakdancing would happen then as well. You know, kids would take a line out of school, and we do the breakdancing in school. Obviously, not all 1,800 pupils were like that. It was strangely only a small amount of us. But, you know, we were sort of left to it, you know, like a lot of other stuff that might become trendy. It segregates people in a way where people fight or feud over it, but that never happened with hip hop, you know. Certainly not in that era. I think that if any feuding or whatnot came, that was later on, you know, through gangs in the city where you'd have a couple of hip hoppers that we were friends at first ish, and then as the mid to late 80s came, we were kind of no longer friends or no longer friendly. And it would sort of go off in that direction, and then you'd have little factions of hip hop people, groups, whatever. And then by the time, and at that time as well, I feel like any kind of form of music that comes out, you know, when it first comes out, it is trendy. You know, it's like, you know, people who haven't really got it in their heart, they're just following a trend. Jump on board as well, and then when that trend sort of fizzles out a bit, the ones who actually love it. Or whether you could look at it as part of their essence and part of who they were meant to be, I don't know. But they're the ones that stayed with it, and obviously those are the ones that are still there to this day, doing graffiti or DJing or creating the music, etc. So that was definitely my earliest memories would be graffiti tagging, leading from that to the youth clubs, breakdancing, electros, and then visually seeing Dougie Fresh on Top of the Pops, because that was the first hip hop thing I visually saw, and I think they all hugely contributed to what would be the next step for us, which was, with me, it was I was MCing, and the first guy I did it with was Jazz, a guy called Jazz, who did jump on a few of our shows as a sort of skit man, if you like,
Yeah.
He was never a rapper. He did DJ a little. He DJ'd before me, and I was rapping, but I was doing the typical old school rap, the funky fresh in the flesh. You will confirm that we are deaf, all that sort of rap sort of stuff, So we again, just finding our feet, and even up till the mid to late 80s, or maybe 80, 87, 88-ish, when I knew, when I started DJing by then, and I knew I wanted to be a DJ. And even at that point, I was still fascinated by the production side of it, because people like Mantronic were out at that point, and to this day, my favorite producer. But and because of Mantronic, he made me want to produce, those beats, those edits, and I love the edit side of it, and of producing, not necessarily because samples and all that weren't really prevalent at that time. It was obviously drum machines and whatnot. But even when the sampling came about, I was still all about the edits, and the drum machine stuff. So yeah.
So it's through writing and all of these elements you've been talking about that magnetically leads you to DJing. Who would have been some of those touchstone influences that actually got you to want to DJ?
The reason Jazz got a set of decks is because we met a guy called Frosty, who, we'd already heard on the street that he was a bit of a troublemaker and stuff like that. And, but, intrigue, I guess, got the better of us, and we hunted him down.
What was it you were hearing back then about Frosty?
That he had a set of turntables, and to me it was like, what? Because when you're that young, when you're a kid, when you're like, 13, 14, 15, it would have been about 14, I think, 15 maybe tops, age 15, which, no, we were 15 in that black and white photo I posted. No, so it would have been about 13, 14, actually, we saw him. And even though we both saw him, and I was like, fucking wow, it was a long time ago. So, like I said, I was doing a bit of MCing. Jez didn't have decks at that time. We were just over his house, using his parents' hi-fi, which was like one of those top end range hi-fis from Audio Excellence, with where the turntable was like 3 inches deep, really expensive hi-fi, and he got in trouble quite a bit with his dad for blasting music loud on it. But the sound was super crisp and clear, and we'd be bumping Mantronic and the electros and all that. So before he had decks, we were just listening to music. And throughout the listening to music, if you had the odd 12-inch that had an instrumental on it, I'd start writing raps. And I think at that point, Jazz was like, I got to get that turntable. So at which point of that, maybe say 84, 85, at which point of that year he said, I'm going to get him for Christmas. I don't know whether it's beginning of the year or leading right up to Christmas. I don't know. But yeah, so that's what, he wasn't, his parents were loaded or nothing. So I think it wasn't just as easy as, oh, can you buy me decks for Christmas? It was, he had to do something as well. He had to save up or whatever. So anyway, he said that. And I was like, okay, we'll see what happens from here. Up until that point, we're listening to music, still attending the odd youth club, and checking out the breakdances and stuff. Doing a little bit myself. I think I was definitely more Crazy Legs orientated and popping than I was a windmill boy, whereas some of the other boys were more specific to windmills, etc., etc. So I was more of a I was good at the Crazy Legs,
When you say the other boys, who were some of the other guys breakdancing? Who were some of the B-boys and B-girls breaking back then?
Well, as good as a couple of them, as good as a few of them were, they were, and it's quite sad really, because one or two of them, a guy called Nicky Taylor was by far the best. I can't remember if he actually entered a competition somewhere and won it. I don't know, but again, to them, as good as they were, and the talent was embedded in them. Certainly two guys. Nicky Taylor was one, and a guy called Charlie was the other one, and they were amazing. They just had it naturally, but it was trendy to them. So when it came and went, they just didn't bother doing it anymore. They weren't. The culture wasn't. It didn't embed in them as much as a select few of us, if you like.
Yeah.
I mean, from what I hear, when it comes to Cardiff and stuff, and like 40 and the early boys, when they were doing it a couple of years before that, obviously what they did with breaking, we were trying to do with DJing and sort of MCing. That stuck with us. Breaking stuck with them, and they went all out with it, and went far. But with us, it was because I wasn't that good a breaker, and Jez didn't break dance at all. There wasn't enough of us to really, I guess, to force that through. Whereas, because breaking back then, yeah, it could be one breaker, but it wouldn't really go anywhere. You had to be part of a small crew at least, a small or big crew. That was, in my experience and opinion, that's what created the best breakers back then. When you were in crews. So we didn't really have that. It was just a couple of us, and there was a few other boys from the other side of the city that were DJing and doing a bit of MCing. But again, one of the MCs was more of a trendy MC, as in, or he treated it as a trend, and he didn't really get into it any more than that, and that was that. So then the ones who really didn't have the deep heart with it, they would sort of filter out as the 2-3 years later went by. And then the hardcore, the ones who, absolutely loved it as the culture and everything else, would stick with it. And what they'd done for the 2-3 previous years still do to this day. Nicky, it was definitely Nicky Taylor. He was like, I can remember him now. He was absolutely phenomenal at every single thing he did, breakdance wise. He could do the things that they were doing on Beach Street. Pretty much nearly all the things they were doing in that burnout in the Roxy. He could do, whether he sat at home watching it endlessly to suss it out, I have no idea. But he had it locked, and it's such a shame that he never went further with it, because he would have been a world champion by now, no doubt about it. So he was the forefront in my mind, Nicky Taylor for breaking. But again, he was in and out of the culture like in no time. Yeah. Jez, similar. Jez was he was a friend more than anything else, from a young age, young age. From about the age of 5, because he lived on the edge of where my grandparents lived, and every time I would be at my grandparents from a young age, 5 or 6. We would sort of semi-hang out, and I know Nobster came sort of like kind of, he came later, but he didn't come and stay. He came and then he moved to Bristol with his parents for like 3 or 4 years, and then he came back, and then he was a beatboxer, and then we went to Penlan, and then I think he went back to Bristol, or he moved away somewhere else. So his involvement was very fragmented in hip hop. He didn't get into it like we got into it straight away. Right. But when he did, he was the beatbox. He was Busy B, or Busy Beatbox, I should say, not Busy B. But so it was Nicky Taylor was but again, we didn't really hang out with Nicky. We were just in school with him. We knew him from school, and kind of that was it. I didn't live far from him, but we never really went over his house or anything. It was always just the youth clubs we would meet at. Sure. And the majority of the youth club as well, they were just youth clubbers. You had a bunch of the guys out of the back smoking. You had a bunch of the girls in there. It wasn't like, like the Bronx was when the youth clubs, when hip hop was coming about with the youth clubs, because everybody in the youth clubs would be into hip hop, But the youth clubs down here weren't like that, they were just local youth clubs. And when the electors came about, and I can't even remember, if I'm honest with you, who was playing. I know people who had electro tapes, and I can't remember whether there was a DJ, as in because DJs then obviously weren't really scratching DJs that were playing in youth clubs. It was just playing records, playing.
It was electro.
Yeah. And it was pretty much, it was always electro. All those early youth clubs, all those tracks came from the electros. People were playing electro compilations. No one knew how to get hold of these records or cassettes or whatever. And I remember being like in the second, let me think now, so it'd be 86, 82, 84. When was Cool J's first album out? Was it 86? About 86, I think.
About 86.
Yeah. So that was the first outside the electros. That was the first tape I heard off a guy in Penland School who'd just come back from New York with his family. And he got handed a copy of Cool J's album. And, we were just like melting, we were like, wow, what the hell is this? This is mind blowing. Yeah. So I heard, I heard Cool J, so electros, and then I heard Cool J. So I heard Cool J before I heard, in a hip hop, rapper kind of context, before I heard anyone else, aside from obviously the singular tracks on the electros. So the first, solo kind of hip hop act was Cool J on a rough tape that someone had from New York, and that just blew me away. But we were asking him, and we were young, and he was like, I don't know where to get it, I have no idea where to get this. It was only a little bit later that we started to realize, maybe when we were 16, 17, just about leaving comp, around about the time of the black and white photos we had done in school, the graph photos, the earliest photos of us as a kind of a crew, three of us, SD posse, three-style posse, we would call it at the time. We just kept flinging names around as kids, because at that time we loved it, but we weren't serious. We weren't serious in a way where we thought this was going to go anywhere other than us just hooking up and having fun, the passion for it, the love for listening to it when you get into something that's suddenly new when you're that age, The Sure Dope Posse was just kind of like me and Jazz at first, and then like I say, we're just flinging names around, trying to act like these people that we were sort of falling in love with, I want to be a crew, I want to be a posse, and we just make it up, it was nothing at all serious about it until when we were the three-style posse, because you had Danny, even though I did a bit graffiti, or previously did graffiti to Danny, as in tags and whatnot. I think by the time we were the SD posse, three-style posse, TSP, I think by the time we were that, we decided to do that. Jez was like not gone, but he was just still scratching his records in his bedroom and kind of like not really doing it much and whatnot. He didn't have the drive and the passion that when I say we did, I think even to this day, throughout my whole life, and I see it with other people as well. And I think it's across the board. If you've got a bunch of people, you've always got one driving force. They're not all driving forces, There's always one that actually drives the rest, if you like, There's the one that organizes things. There's one that, makes the phone calls and says, right, are we doing it today now? And this and that and the other, it's never all the people. There's always one, maybe two people that sort of are the driving force behind stuff. And I guess that was me, the driving force, not just early on, but throughout my whole life. Most of the stuff that we've done, most of the people, what they became wouldn't be what they became. We wouldn't have done what we've done if I hadn't like sort of just got off my ass every day and said, right, come on, let's chop, let's get this sorted, Without that, people just drift and do their own things, and then nothing happens. It's the same with the other small crews who stayed long term in Swansea. There was only a couple of us really. Like the graffiti boys were more solo. They weren't so much crews per se, but the DJs, wise and DJ side of it. Yeah. When they actually started to develop as a sort of a crew later on, there was always one driving force in them that would organise.
That was you. You brought the structure.
Me on my side, but then you had Alfy, who was DJ Demo, who throughout Swansea's history did the nightclub stuff. A little bit later, then meeting Keith Wookie, and he was the driving force behind behind sort of that, at least in that era. You know, he's another guy you need to chat to, certainly about the hip hop side of nightclubs and DJing. You know, he's as legendary as I am in that respect, you know. So I don't even like using that word legendary. You know, I think people are only legends when they're gone, you know, not when they live in. But yeah, he's up there, you know, with on that side. You know, he is the forefront. Him and Keith doing the space and whatnot. But yeah, so I DJ'd when Jez sort of like, it was quite obvious to me that he, even with me being a driving force to try and get people together, he wasn't really, he didn't want it like I wanted it, you know? And even though we remained friends, and we still to this day friends, and you know, what we've done and everything else, and we've got him on board stuff, you know, just to be there with us, like I said, gigs, skits and things like that. It's blown him away every time. He just can't believe that it's us doing it, you know. And I had to say to him, pull him to one side and say, look, man, you know what I was like. You know, I would never give up on stuff, and that I was always going to do this. And yeah, so some of those old school boys, they really, really appreciate me, you know, and the fact that we were called the old school no sellout boys, you know. That's what we were known as to a few crews down here, because even when people went kind of over from hip hop into rave, when the rave era came about and the warehouse raves and all that, we were like, fuck that, man, you know what I mean? I'm hip hop, that's it. End of, you know what I mean? And not in an over moralistic sense. It just didn't feel right for me. It wasn't me, right. You know. Even though I'd gone to the occasional rave for a laugh, I was never into drugs. I was a boxer, you know, and I was always quite fit and healthy, and it didn't really do anything for me, the idea of it at all. So yeah, hip hop was it for me. It was I could feel it in my veins, you know, and just a necessity for me somehow to, you know, from the moment we realized that we were actually a proper crew and we actually could make music and possibly release it, from that moment, you know, that I hadn't looked back, you know. Obviously, like everyone in life, I guess, we all hit walls and have hindrances, and some more than others where things, you know, hinder us. But I've never ever given up. I've just had periods in my life where I guess life gets in the way, you know, like one sort of period during quite a what could have been, you know, quite a higher or more elated period in hip hop for us, where because I was a boxer and I fought a lot, I ended up beating up this guy who was hitting this woman, and I ended up going to prison for it, you know. So when so that period then obviously put a stifle on what we would be as a crew, if you like. And then you know, I was only in for a few months, mind you, but you know, obviously the before that and the after that, so it was like a year before, year after, it was like, you know, it wasn't the same, you know. So anyway, yeah, when I came out, that was around, I was about 17 then, you know, so and long left school, and so obviously prison, you know, it wasn't like the main wing. It was YOs, they call it, Youth Offenders Unit. It was another part of Swansea Prison. But yeah, when I came out, my life changed for the better. I was never like a lot of people that go in who get institutionalized, and they kind of either love being in there or they just don't think there's anything to it. And I'm like, nah, this is bullshit, you know. I'm fucking never coming back here again, you know. You know, even though I did have a fucking laugh in there, I will admit, you know, because people did look up to me and stuff in there because of my family name. My family name was quite big down here at the time. But I hated that, you know. I always say, when people say, oh, you're a fucking culinary, I'm like, oh, fucking hell, yeah, so? You know, I don't need my family to back me up. I'm me, you know. But yeah, so most people who know me can be quite intimidated by me because they think I'm going to fucking do something naughty or nasty to them. But that was many moons ago, you know, all of that. Yeah. And I was never a bully. I was a bully vigilante, if anything. I used to fucking beat up bullies, like, you know, because I got bullied myself when I was a kid. So, but yeah, I just never took shit off anyone. And I think from that moment to now, it's the same. It's no different. Like, I just don't take shit off anyone, like, you know.
So from that moment, let's talk about the evolution of these two crews, which you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, both of which were very much important in equal part to your come up. How do you meet Soda and Dane?
Right. Yes. Obviously, Knobster, Soda at the time.
Yeah.
our meetings were fragmented because he's kind of been like this all his life in a way, knapsack on your back, off on the road, and you don't see him for a year or two, and you just got to get on with it in between that. So even after we hit a point around the first demo that was sent away to Hip Hop Connection by a friend of ours, Hardcore No Tricks, the track was called. And all it was a loop beat, that was a prevalent loop beat within hip hop, with me cutting over it and Soda rhyming over it, So unbeknownst to us, a friend of ours, Paul Duncan, D-Rock, one of the Bont or Ponta de Lice boys, he sent it away to a Hip Hop Connection, and the next thing you know, we didn't know he did it. We didn't know he sent it away. All I know is that he knocked on my door one day and said, "Right, I've got some good news for you." I'm like, "Yeah, what's that?" And he's like, "You won a record deal." And I'm like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" So which he explained what he did then. And I'm like, "What do you do that?" And I was like, "What do you do that for?" That was just a bedroom demo, It wasn't even, we didn't consider it a demo because we weren't of the mindset of making hip hop, to release. We were just jamming, having a laugh, as crews kind of do when they get together, and not just hip hop, other cultures. You just get together, you hang out, you do what you do, and that's that. It wasn't a point in our minds that we thought we were going to go anywhere beyond that until he did that. So Duncan D-Rock, he created our path by doing that. If it weren't for him doing that, we may never have made music beyond me coming out of prison or whatever else, But I knew it from that moment in my heart, and from that moment I thought, because I suppose if you're a guitar player or a musician and you've learnt to play it, classically, or by someone's taught you or whatever, then your brain's got to tell you that you have a chance to get somewhere in life with that. But with hip hop, it was different. It was so new. I mean, obviously decks weren't considered an instrument or nothing like that. It was just so out. It was something that was so brand new and outside the box. To me, it was never a possibility to be able to do what these guys are doing on the electros or like Cool J or anything like that. And so until he did that, until he sent it away and we won a competition, just a little light bulb went off in my head, thinking, fuck, man, we can do this just like anybody else can do it, So if we want to do this, let's do it. So that, I think, even though before then I was a driving force to some degree within my own life, and I do, what I wanted to do, whether people liked it or not. If they weren't there to do it, then okay, but I'm going to still do it anyway, whether it be graffiti or whatever, breakdancing, So until that happened, that demo moment with the record deal, we won like one track on a compilation, and a girl that Soda was seeing at the time called Sarah, aka Sweet Pea. She, again, she was his missus, so she would just, like I was saying just now, just jump on our tracks and have a laugh, and just, write some rhymes. But because she was a female and nobody down here was rapping female-wise, I guess whoever was doing this competition or whatever must have seen that and thought, right, because this was, she did that shit. Maybe before the wee pack of girl rappers and the she rockers and all that, or certainly close to that era around about that time. When were they? 89, 88, 89?
88, 89,
yeah, so
absolutely.
This was like 87, So she was, she was rapping with no female influence per se that I can remember, and no intentions to get anywhere other than just have a laugh in the bedroom,
Going back to those years, you mentioned having a laugh, being a kid in those years. Do you think that hip hop helped you to process your feelings in a way that you might not have been able to prior, up until that point of discovery?
Yeah, I had I love my mum and I love my stepdad, but I did have a pretty tumultuous upbringing, up until the age of well, I got to be honest, up until I left home, really. And I left home at 50 and I just thought, fuck this, I'm going. So I think hip hop did save my life. It really did.
It was therapy for you.
Oh, absolutely, man. To me, it was the only thing I had in life. I didn't have anything else, I didn't have anything that I got attached to that I thought I could be part of this and I could make this make me better, or anything like that. And I genuinely did, even as a teenager, think that. So when I went to prison, which is obviously not I went to prison not because I was convicted, because I broke all my bonds. You know, I was on 9 o'clock curfew. I wasn't allowed to hang out in the area it happened, and I wasn't allowed to hang around with any of the people that were associated with it, you know. But I was caught one night in the place past 9 o'clock with all the people that I wasn't allowed to hang around with. So I broke all 3 of my conditions. And when I was 17, and they just took me straight to prison. And I was, I can look back now, and I'm not proud of it, obviously, but because it was only 3 months and it was just remand, and when I went to court, then I was let off. You know, at the end of the day, the judge targeted me because I was a boxer, and he classed my fists as weapons. You know, and I was like, well, I was defending a woman who was getting beaten up by a fucking guy, like, you know. Yeah. So I think he took sympathy with me on that, and that's why I got off. But I obviously did the remand. But when I was in there, I couldn't. I mean, I was drawing hip hop, I was drawing graffiti. You know, that's all that was on my mind. In fact, I was the first to ever do a graffiti piece in Swansea prison, because they didn't allow it in there. And it was, I posted up a piece on my Facebook wall the other day, Rossi. It's a Rossi graffiti piece in the local newspaper. And one of the guys for that crew, who was the first kind of Swansea graffiti crew, John Sermon, he was in prison at the time as well. So, you know, me being me and him being him, we got together and we did the first ever piece in Swansea prison, a graffiti piece. They only let us use 1 can. So all the rest was paint, you know, like paint brushes and stuff. And we were only allowed to use 1 can. They wouldn't allow us any more than that. And it was under supervision, obviously, because I suppose people do stupid things with aerosol cans, don't they? So, yeah, So in prison, my mind was hip hop. So when I got out, I was more solidified within hip hop. Because of what happened to me with prison. And again, you know, if I hadn't gone to prison, maybe I still probably would have done hip hop. It led me on that path to be more dedicated with hip hop, if you like. So when I came out, not straight away, but pretty much not long after, maybe a year, 2 years tops. Because it was on my mind the whole time. I wanted to know how to make hip hop music properly and not just spin loops back and record them. Because we did what a lot of other people did, which was tape loops. You know, because we didn't have equipment, drum machines, and all this sort of stuff. We used to tape loop stuff. So we get a tape. You'd have a double cassette tape, 1 record, 1 play. So you'd play a bit, record, stop, pause it, switch it, go back, play, record, stop. And you have to, tedious, it'd take ages, but you'd have a loop then, a tape loop. And that's how we got our beats. So that's what we had. So, beyond that, I was like, how am I going to get equipment to make this stuff? I mean, what do they even use, you know? Aside from seeing stuff like on the cover of Mantronic's album, like the SP1200 and things like that, we didn't know what the hell they were, this equipment. And it wasn't sampling back then. It was just drum machines. So I'm like, I'm never going to be able to get one of these. So it was tape loops at first. And then when I came out of prison, my mind was set on how do we do this? How can I get this? So within 2 years, I went to Nottingham, music industry management, for 4 years, 3 years, probably. Actually, it was 3 years. Yeah, 3 years. Because that was that in Nottingham, and I believe there might have been one in London, but I know there was one in either Brighton or Nottingham, an engineering course, and there wasn't one anywhere else. So when interested in the management side of it, I just thought, well, I want to do that course. So so that's how determined I was. I was like, and I thought about, I didn't know about that course, but I thought about how the hell are we going to get equipment and make music and this and the other. So I'd said to Nobster at that time, who was by that point Nobster, sort of late 80s, 89-ish, whatever. And I said, look, man, if I do this, I don't want it to be like I'm deserting us, I want to do it for us, for us to get somewhere. And I know it's going to take me 3 years, but I'm going to be coming back and forth and all this, throughout the time I'm up there, and you come up as well. And he said, you know what? He said, I was offered through Swansea, I think it was through Swansea University, and coincidentally, a guy called Paul Durden, who was the co-writer of the movie Twin Town, who we know very well as well. And he said, he mentioned to me, if I do this course, teaching kids about rap, and that side of culture and hip hop and stuff like that. That they pay him money, and that he would put that into equipment. So he put money into certain equipment, and I put knowledge into that equipment. Does that make sense? So I did the learning of the music industry, because we were pissed off. I know Root X Records, that deal that we had fell through, but only because the company went bankrupt within a couple of months of us having the deal, and then we had the Leader One sort of offer, which is back and forth, and Simon Harris didn't make it easy at all to push it through. But Leader One was great. He was a lovely guy and everything else, and he's like, I'll do what I can and stuff. We were just getting pissed off because we felt, well, we knew we were being treated like either like nobodies or by people, or like people who had no knowledge about it. So they were just like, yeah, whatever. So that's another reason why I thought, well, engineering and to find out about the music industry, how it works, this is going to be a huge benefit for us, So those are the main reasons I went away and did that. And when I came back, I consider myself a full engineer.
What did you learn when you came back, outside of being a full engineer?
Well, when I came back from Nottingham back to Swansea, I learned that the best way for us to go about anything musically release-wise was to set up an independent label and not chase major deals or nothing like that. So that's when we set up Wonky Wax, pretty much, because we were like, look, let's just, and if we, set up Wonky Wax and then as we go along down the line, someone says, look, we'll give you a deal, then maybe we'll take that deal. But right now, let's just not concentrate on the industry. Let's just do it ourselves. Basically what Blade did with 691 Influential, he just thought, fuck the industry, I'm going to do this myself. So that's the most important fact that I learned within it, is like, it doesn't matter how much knowledge I had on the music industry were who they were. And even if we got signed, there was always a chance that they'd want stuff from us that either they didn't tell us or that they wouldn't give us full artistic rights. So, I mean, we did try, I won't lie. We sent, I can't remember some of the labels offhand, but we sent, our Steel Toe and a few of the tracks that we had around by that time to Vinyl Solution was one. Well, I think, don't 100% quote me on this, I think Gunshot were on Vinyl Solution at first. They were definitely involved with that maybe later on, but so we sent stuff to Vinyl Solution and all these sort of underground, the Richie Rich's label spin-offs and things like that. And we had some great replies back, but they didn't. We were Mortal Danger then. This was slightly before Headcase, or before we decided to be Headcase. Yeah. Wonky Wax was created, and then we decided to be Headcase, if you like, because up until that point, up until Steel Toe, which was 93, we were Mortal Danger. Steel Toe is what made us decide, right, this is nutty, this is wonky, we're Edders, we're Ed cases, People look at that name and think that we're psychos or nutters or fighty, but it's not. It's purely because it all relates from us being different within music. Wonky Wax was the same. Wonky Wax was like, it's wonky, it's different. It's not straight. It's not a straight shelf. It's a wonky shelf, but it still works, if you like, That was our concept on Wonky Wax, wonky and wonkiness. And then we thought, well, the name's got to sit with it as well. And I think it was Knobster that came out with Headcase Ladz, and I came out with Wonky Wax.
What's happening now? What's happening now? I want you round. Dr. Martin's boots. Dr. Martin's boots. Dr. Martin's boots. Hitting all in destiny hoops. It's the most wonky man. N-O-B-S-C-A, nuts smells rotten. When I comes, I get some bustin' and a flopping. We storm through the scene, just to make a wanker do the bean. And you know what I mean? Do it like this time, my sound so clean. Scruffy cat, if you get 41. You come around here, you're gonna have a gun and a shot. In your fucking head like God. I used to break the woods, come some on the flat. Chuck, ooh, on the mic. To all the shite, on over flat line. But they come back, see us on the go. The rock comes, he says, whoa, no, still fucking cold. Going on the CD, I'm moving wrong, cause you know they got so greedy. Got to see me Bobby, coming like Johnny Torshak and his black and white army grind. Bash, do one, smash, trash. New bug comes to eat them up like smash, smash. Bangles only play, do it like this in the great place to me. Jump on the rock, do some nose that you can.
I'm not 100 or 1,000% absolute when it comes to the timeline, you know, as in years. I might be like a half a year out or year out, year in there. Unless I tell you, yeah, it was definitely that year. Like Steel Toe was 93. I know the years of our releases, but sometimes because, certainly where Nobster was concerned, because he would move away or go and we wouldn't see him and this and that and the other, and he'd have all these breaks. Sometimes I get my years mixed up with how long he was away, you know, and how long I did stuff without him or whatever. So yeah, Steel Toe was 93. Wonky Wax was created 93. By that point, I'd come out of university, so university must have been 89, 90 for me to be there 3 years. So I'm trying to work it out like that, like a map in my head, you know, because I haven't actually diaried it out. I did write a diary for like 22 years and I lost it. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about Steel Toe, which, like you say, it marks this major turning point for yourselves. Nobster's no longer reluctant to use his Welsh accent. You're both leaning into everything that encapsulates Swansea and Wales. Would you go as far to say that Steel Toe was the moment you felt stability musically?
Yeah, and because of knowing what I knew about the music industry at that point, you know, and the fact that, you know, and our tutor was amazing. You know, he was like, he was an ex-lawyer, our music industry management teacher. And he was an ex-lawyer, and he was honest with us straight up. And he would say to you, look, unless you get offered full artistic rights, he said, never mind the rights about the publishing and the rights about this and the rights about that. He said, if you care about your music and you want your music to be yours, unless you have full artistic rights, he said, if you take that deal and you don't make enough money for that label, they will turn you into an act that you don't want to be, or they will get your records sent to remixers and other genres of music that you might not like. They will mold you into something that you weren't originally. And of course, that really sat with me when he said those things. So, which is why we decided, fuck it, it's not bothered about really getting signed. We'll send a few demos and what have you out, but if nothing happens, it's not a problem because we're still going to release stuff ourselves anyway.
Sure.
So that was what we were set from there. 93. Obviously, Wonky Heads and Shonky Album and all that was actually started being recorded in 96. So even though it was released in 98.
Backing up for a second.
Yeah.
Without talking about the wonky stuff, because there's an important time where you're developing your own identity. You're leaning into this identity and experimentation. What were those moments like in terms of you being your own audience and turning practice into purpose? Can you talk about that experimentation with Knobs to Nuts?
Headcase Ladz. Sort of finding ourselves. You mean, like instead of following American rappers, just being us. Almost like rap had never existed, but we just suddenly come up with it. Because obviously, that's really what it was with us at that time. Because we'd never, I think the only ones we'd heard with regional accents, and not just regional accents, but they encompassed their local area or their patois within their culture, whether it be Jamaica or whatever, was London Posse, and I think a couple from that that sort of ilk at that era. And we hadn't, and we never wanted to be us, like, yeah, let's use a Welsh accent because London Posse sound like London. It wasn't like that. We just never had an influence or any hip hop at that time that influenced us to make records with our own accent. In fact, I remember sitting down and chatting with Knobs about this and saying, look, is this going to really fuck us up? Are people just going to laugh at us because our Welsh accent, I mean, I don't know, with Cardiff's a little bit more fluent than this. I mean, people in the past have said you've got more of a Liverpool twang than a Welsh twang per se, but you're more fluent. You're not like, all right, but and all that, because the further you go into Wales, it becomes much more Welsh, doesn't it? And
Absolutely.
obviously, I've lived everywhere around England. I've lived, outside England, and you end up, you become a bit more spoken normally, fluently. I'm a bit Welsh now because I've been down here for more years. But when I was younger, I was probably like that, and then of course Lou Llanelli, which is the further town down again, he's outright Welshy sounding, So with us, we Wenglish. There's even a dictionary in the local museum called Wenglish, which directly relates from Swansea, which is the crossover between English and Welsh. Where words are brought together, 3 words are brought together into one. So when people think we speak fast, it's not that we speak in fast, we just put 3 words into one. Like instead of saying, I haven't seen you for ages, we'll say, I've seen you for ages, which makes 1 word instead of 3 words or 4 words, So that's Wenglish. And the reason that comes about, and it says in the dictionary, is because of the London connection where it ended M4 with Swansea, because the M4 ends at Swansea.
Right.
And then I don't know why it missed Cardiff in that sense, because obviously you guys, I mean, maybe years ago you were a bit more Welsh speaking, but for me, Cardiff's always been more fluent. You'd be much more understandable, less Welsh accent than further into Wales, if you like. So with us, we were scared. We were like, shall we do this? And the reason we talked about it and just actually discussed it is because we'd visually seen it and heard it with people who used to come around to, bedsit, because obviously we had a track on Shonky's album called Bed Sits and Flats, because that track was purely about the fact that we all grew up and lived in our own little bed sits and flats. We didn't have houses or none of that shit. And obviously some still live with their parents or whatever. But so we were in the bed sits and jamming, getting together, having a hook up waking up one morning, you know, like say maybe yourself, you get together with the boys and all watch movies, you know, some retro movies, whereas we get together and have a jam, you know. And excuse me, yeah. So the people that would come around weren't hip hoppers. They weren't into hip hop because, like I said, there was only a few in Swansea who were like, you know, hardcore to it or dead set to it. We had Alfy and Keith and them doing the Space Base, which was originally Bubba Club, and then went to Space Base. And then you had us then who, because we were dead set on releasing some records, we would, when we would jam, the ones who were into hip hop, we would create little demos or jam tapes, and we would swap them around with the boys from Bont who were into hip hop. But they didn't really do jams or nothing at that time. They were just loving hip hop, and they we gave them some jam tapes. They'd give us some tapes that they had from hip hop from America that we couldn't get, etc. So our influence, or the first signal, the first green light for us to go, do you know what, let's do this, which blew us away, was normal people, the average pub goer, the average pisshead, whatever, completely normal people that weren't into anything other than just getting up in the morning, going to work, coming home, going out for a pint in the weekend, getting up on the mic because the buzz was there and we were having a laugh. They were like, yeah, give me the fucking mic. And we're like, yeah, go on in, just you rapping, and they had no preconceptions that they wanted to be a rapper.
Right.
They weren't like, I'm going to try and be like LL Cool J. They didn't even know who the fuck these rappers were. So they would just be themselves completely and utterly. And of course, when we heard that, like the one main guy, he's passed away now, God rest his soul, but the one main guy was a guy called Amos, and he got on the mic and blew me in Nobster's mind. I've still got the tape because that's one thing I do is document. Over everything and everyone I know, I document as much as I possibly can. It's like an OCD habit of mine. I got thousands of photos and I document people's lives through videos, and I used to carry a camcorder around with me, and all this sort of stuff. So I got a tape of him and that jam, but he just gets on the mic and he's just completely himself. Like I said, no inhibitions to be anything other than himself and have a laugh. And he was, his accent came out, the Swansea accent came out, and it just sounded right. His words might not be the most, phenomenally lyrically flowing, but because he had no preconceptions, he was just being him. It was amazing. If I'd taken that rhyme, or if he'd done it longer and put a beat over it and put it through a professional studio and everything else, it probably would have sold as a record or something. It was that authentic.
There was a level of authenticity you're talking about.
Yeah, he wasn't like when a lot of MCs, a lot of MCs I've met, a lot of MCs we work with, who came down with us. I won't mention names because I don't want to make it out like they were shit at what they did, because they're all great at what they did. But they, a few came down to Mike Yatham and before then as well to record with us, and they were just like, oh man, because the size of the studio, like 64 track desk and these fucking all this glitzy glamourness. But and we were like, look, man, fuck all that shit. If you want to do it in the fucking in the bin section out the back, we can do that. We don't give a shit about this studio. Like, we just here because we're here. So I kind of got that. It can be scary when you go into a big studio. Your mind is set on being as perfect as you can. But these guys, none of that existed in their minds. They were like, fuck, I don't give a shit. I'm just going to be me and have a laugh. And that's what made us look at it and think, do you know what? Wow, that's what we want to be. We want to do that. And at that point, we realized, because up until that point, we thought about it. We thought, should we use our accents and all that? Because it was obviously from 90 to 91 where Ripping Up a Rule Book came out, and when I say came out, we didn't release it, but it was a proper studio track and all that, and we sent it away for demos and for potential record label stuff or whatever. And so it was about 89 we recorded it. Actually, we recorded it 89 in someone's studio, like a professional engineer's studio, but it was like in his house. Lovely guy. He'd only ever engineered European pop stars like Shah and all that up to that point, but he was a lovely guy. And yeah, we found out about him because we were asking about, do you know any studios on Swansea we can record? Do you know any studios we can record? Because they were few and far between, back then. And we came across him. He was a postman, he was. We came across him through a friend who was a pisshead, who lived in his village, who said, yeah, I know a guy, he's a postman. He got a studio up the road. Mm-hmm. And that was how we thought, fuck, not cheeky, but we were four, and we thought, well, fuck it, let's just go knock his door. So that's what we did. He didn't know who we were. Two young kids, late teens, saying, "No, come here, record in your studio." And he was like, "What do you do?" He said, "Rap." "Oh yeah, I've heard of rap." He said, I don't really mix rap here, but yeah, it costs blah 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 this much an hour or this much a day." And he was really lovely and bubbly and nice guy. So when we started doing the stuff with him, we didn't go in and just do the demo. We went in and we got the ideas at home because we didn't have equipment. We had to use his equipment. So if he had a drum machine here and there, whatever, we had to try and get hip hop beats out of him. We didn't have a sampler, none of that sort of stuff. At least not to the extent that the big wigs were using anyway. We'd rusty up some stuff together and whatnot. But we had the decks and whatnot. So we made it, pretty much in his studio. Those early demos, and he was just a random guy. He was a random postman, like I said.
You recorded a lot of music. There's so many demos of music being recorded at this point in time. Was it ever challenging to tell a good idea from a bad idea when you're recording as much as you were? How did you measure that quality bar?
Through friends, I think, passing stuff around and getting their reactions and opinions on it. Because I was doing so much, I was making so much, scratching so much, I don't know if you saw the picture I posted of the cassette tapes.
Yeah.
Nobster says in a couple of magazine interviews, we had like 90 C90 tapes or 70 C90 tapes full of jams. Now, obviously, that could sound amazing to some people, but a lot of that on them tapes was shit, or just us fucking about or whatever. But to me, that I was lost in it to the point where I couldn't decide. I genuinely, I was making the beats, scratches, this and that and the other. Because a lot of them jam tapes are not necessarily full of MCs or knobs of rapping or whatever. A lot of them are beats, jams and beats that were to become, or with the idea to become tracks. But I was lost in it, and I needed, this is the other thing as well. Even though I might be a driving force, I'm not a driving force for myself. Does that make sense? When I'm on my own, I wouldn't say I don't want to do it. I just feel lost. I'm a people person. You know what I mean? So, and I was back then as well, because we were always together, hooking up, jamming, and we would, like the saying, two heads are better than one sort of thing, Right. So I would really heavily rely on, Nicky P, D-Rock, he was called J Bass at the time. He's called Elements Raw now. Jay, and the people who really loved and knew hip hop and knew what it was. I really heavily relied on their opinion as to whether something was banging or whether something was going to work or not. They might not have always given that opinion, which is probably why there's so many tapes. If I'd done one tape with 20 beats on, and they'd said all of them had given a solid opinion on that tape, then maybe I could have picked out tracks and we could have had an album by 92 or 93. So they didn't always express their opinions. This is why I kept making stuff, because I was just unsure of whether they would have, these beats would have been viable to do anything with, So yeah, so and same with Headcase stuff later on, I'd make stuff and the reactions of people hearing it when we were jamming it. Oh, I know my word, that beat, that loop, man, and that would be enough for me to then set that loop aside and go, right, winner, and I would write that as well on the sample disc or whatever, winner, because I knew I had a good reaction off someone with it. But a lot of them don't really have that on, and not because they're not winners, because there was no one around to really say to me, "Oh, that's fucking awesome," or
you weren't getting that validation.
Not from everything, no. Which is why I had so much, or we had so many tapes. Like I said, so and because we had our own lives as well. We weren't living in each other's pockets. When I was doing stuff in my bedroom, I was. Obviously kind of on my own, just constantly make. And that's the thing with producers and DJs. We do tend to do that. Rappers, I guess, as well. They're in the bedroom, they got the headphones on, they're writing in the notepads. It doesn't always happen when we all get together for jams. Right. The jam side of it, I think this is synonymous with certainly with my life in music, from Headcase, Goatboy, hip hop, every bit of music I've been involved with, is the feeding off the vibe of other people when you're jamming or when you're doing it, Many a time we would be jamming and we chuck something on and we'd know straight away just by everyone in the room not really getting down on it, that it wasn't working. So then out comes the tape, right, bang another one in or make another loop or whatever until everyone's like, whoa, oh my God, that's the one. And then, of course, to go with that. But when you're on your own, you haven't got that, and especially as a producer, or even a DJ, when you're there on your own and you're doing it over and over and over again, it becomes so monotonous in your head that you actually do lose any sort of recognition of whether it's all right or good, or whether you're doing a good job or is it shit, or you know what I mean? Because you haven't got someone there saying to you, man, look, that is the fucking business. So hip hop, and I think that's hip hop across the board, certainly in where it stemmed from in New York and all that, it all happened because of the get together of people. Kool Herc might have blasted his shit out of Sedgwick Avenue flat windows and whatnot, but that didn't create hip hop. All he did was create the spark for everyone to come together to then create hip hop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Without everyone coming together, there's no hip hop. So I think an important part of hip hop is the sharing, the cultural connective energy that that created the four elements. The break-in, MC, and DJ, and graph. I mean, graph. Obviously, that's a whole other. People debate about that, but for me, it is part of the four elements in hip hop because that's what I grew up with it in. But some graph writers will debate that and say, look, graffiti was about way before hip hop came about. And then you could say, well, so was breakdancing. Breakdancing was fucking in Africa before it was breakdancing over here, So, but what I'm talking about, the four elements within what hip hop culture became, regardless of what they were before that, they were absolutely. They needed the necessity of people coming together. Without the people coming together, those things didn't work or won't work as well. You could sit in your room for the rest of your life and and try and make hip hop beats with no one around you, on your own, and no influence, and it'll show. The same with soul and everything, though, isn't it? All those hardships, all those times, blues, all that. Those people weren't necessarily on their own doing it. They were hooking up with other people that were lonely. Does that make sense? Or going through hardships, and then they created these jams, jazz jams, blues jams. And then they created all that music. So you got the hardships, which we had, obviously being in an all-boys school, and being in rough neighborhoods without really any culture attached to them, and then finding that that new music and that culture attached to it, and just embracing it. It's mad with Swansea though, because it was like when we were growing up, it was probably like one black guy in Swansea. Well, one black guy that I ever saw in my life up until late teens, and his name was Saul. He used to work in Walker's Crisps, and I chased him round. I was so fascinated by him because I'd never seen a black guy before, other than on a record or whatever. And I didn't chase him. I followed him, and he stopped. He said, "Oh, you follow me?" Bit of a Jamaican accent on him. And I said, and I was only young, and I was only like mid-teens, late teens. And I said, "Yeah, sorry." He said, "I'm really sorry." I panicked. And I said, "Look, I know this is going to sound really weird now, but I love black music. And I just can't get anywhere. Can you help me out?" And that man gave me like 4 funk tapes and a jazz tape. You know what I mean? He could have just told me to fuck off. Like, he said, "Look, I work in Walker's Crisps. And Walker's Crisps was there, and I lived like 5 minutes down the road." I said, "I just lived down the road, but how can I get these tapes off you?" And he said, "Right, I come to work this way every day. I said, tomorrow I will bring some tapes and you can come meet me, yeah?" And I met him, and he gave me 4 funk tapes. So that's the first black guy I ever met. And up until that point, I wouldn't say my parents are racist, but it's, you got areas of in cities that are predominantly white or whatever. They're not intentionally racist. It's just like in mainstream bullshit media and all that, and obviously what the government and governments and God knows whatever else, media push out to the people in whatever way, and people and parents of old, grandparents are the worst again. Oh, get that black person away or whatever. But I never paid attention to any of it, and I was absolutely fascinated by black culture from a young teenage age, Well, actually, Madness was my first record, Complete Madness, when I was, I think I was 8 years old. But I had it bought for me because I was taking it to John Menzies, and my mum said, right, what record do you want? And of course, as a kid that age, and with all the records on the wall, what record am I going to pick? Madness, because they're all looking nutty as fuck on the cover. And I'm like, that record, but I want that. And of course, what music is Madness? Ska, which is black music, essentially. So that was the first, for me, of that. My parents had they loved a lot of black culture, like black music, but they loved Tom Jones and Irish music and all that shit as well. So they weren't really stuck in anything in particular, really. But so I used to pinch the black culture records out of my dad's collection, early funk, some stuff like that. Because he didn't really have a wide range, but yeah, that's the story about how I first met the first black man in the flesh, and how he gave me funk and jazz tapes. And I kind of I met him a good few times following that, and I even met him because he worked in Walker's Crisps for years, and my cousins later on worked in Walker's Crisps, and I met him again. And when I met him, he hugged me and he said, "My God, you can remember that? Wow." He said, "Wow." And he said, "Oh, do you know what?" And he shook my hand, he hugged me and he said, "Wow." He said, "Do you know what? You make me proud, Because I can imagine to him living in a predominantly white city, I have no doubt he was given shit by a lot of people. I have no doubt at all. And for him to see a random white kid, not a man, a kid, be influenced by something that came from his colours culture, I would have been proud of that, most certainly. He told me he was, but yeah. So that's the story of me, sort of at that era getting into a wider range of music. It's obviously sample based stuff, or where music where there was the sample-y, the later stuff, the late 80s stuff came from and whatnot,
All of which, of course, is very informative on what would later on come with your Wonky Wax Headcase Ladz debut. What was the starting point for Wonky Eds?
Well, when we did Steel Toe in '93, after sort of hooking up with, I say hooking up, having these jams where we would have local heads come in and whatnot. And we at that point fully realized that we can do this. We can use our accents and it does work. And it doesn't sound shit. And we don't sound like fucking Ruth Maddock on Heidi High and blah, 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 It's just going to work. No offense to Ruth Maddock. Rest in peace, you beautiful soul. Love Heidi High, but you know what I mean? The very, very Welsh accent, we just didn't know if it would work. And we didn't want to be put into a category of that either. We wanted people to see us for who we were within hip hop, not compare us to other fucking Max Boyce or something like that, you know what I mean? As legendary as he is as well, but you know what I mean? We wanted to just be the hip hop side of the Welsh sort of rap. But from Steel Toe, when we made that, the reason it took us, a good few years, well, Nobster moved to Bristol. I think it was around about the time that him and Sarah split up, because they'd been together since we were teenagers. Sweet Pea, the one that did won the record deal, and we won the single deal. And he split up with her, and I think he'd had enough of Swansea at that point, and he just wanted to go away. So because he lived in Bristol, he had some family in Bristol. When we were in our teens, going back to what I was saying about him going away and then me and Jez doing it, he went to Bristol to work, which I joined him later on. Because I had enough of Swansea as well, and I had a ghetto blaster, which pretty much was a kind of I think given the ghetto blaster to Kaptin to put in the museum for next year, because it's what we made. But it was the start of Wonky Edge, and all that, because we would be up Redland Park and Ashton Court up the top and stuff with the ghetto blaster, because it had a mic input in it and I could record on it as well. So I could play an instrumental in one tape, record on the other tape, microphone input in there. And obviously I wouldn't be doing cuts, but I would be the one making the beats and stuff in, where I was living up there by St. Paul's. But yeah, so that was the start really of all the initial ideas that became the Shonky album and the Wonky Heads album, when we did then move back to Swansea. So that's why there was a gap between Steel Toe and the release of our first album. So leading up to Steel Toe, went to music industry management to figure out about the industry. Obviously, little did I know that when I came back, Nobster would be, too emotionally head-fucked to really make music. So he went to Bristol. So that's the only reason that gap happened. I think if that hadn't happened, then we could Wonky Heads probably wouldn't exist, but a version of Wonky Heads would have come a lot sooner, So all of that era from '93, Steel Toe up to Wonky Heads, which was actually firstly being recorded in a studio, like the grassroots stuff, the videos and all that with cars and all that was 96, 97. But Wonky Heads was released in 98. So even though the album didn't actually take us 2 years to make, it was an amalgamation of from 93 to 96 of all the ideas that we'd had, literally pretty much all the tracks, maybe not every track, but all the tracks, certainly the titles or the concepts or the ideas, they were all jammed on that Ghetto Blaster, in Bristol, between me and Nobster. And when we came back, then and we would, got back to jamming and doing stuff like that. We met F. I think we met F on a bit in between, because we'd obviously come back and forth to Swansea when I was working up there, and Nobster was working up there. I chefed at Bristol Airport, and I can't remember what. Nobster was there as well doing something in Bristol Airport. I can't remember what. I think he was on the packing of all the jewelry and all that goes on the planes, because they all have to get put in secure boxes and all that stuff. So he was doing that, which was highly guarded, security oriented shit, So I couldn't see him really and work much. And I was doing all the staff meals for Bristol Airport and all the fresh cakes that went on the planes. So that's why we were up there job wise. But of course, afterwards, then we'd be up the park hanging out. Over each other's bed sits or whatever we live in, and going to places like Cozy's, which was like a hip hop cafe up there. That's where I first met Banksy as well, like Robin, and a lot of other people, Two Row, all these guys, early Aspects before they were Aspects, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, so of course then he got more influence then, and we seen that side of that culture up there early on too. Maybe not 80s early on, but certainly 90s, because there was some good shit coming out in the 90s of Bristol. And that was spouting us to just, and I think we both realized, like, if we could stay up here and make music up here, but, let's get back to where we were going when we left here, and kick it back off again. So that's what we did. We kind of pretty much both decided to come back. Even if we didn't come back at the exact same time, it was within weeks or a couple of months of each other. But during that period of being at Bristol, that's when we were back and forth or nipping up Cardiff, and because we had the vibe more to meet more people and seeing these other people in Bristol and doing it like this and that. Let's get back, and then we'd speak to people, meet people through Cardiff, through grassroots, this and that and the other, or someone would we'd order or get a record from someone, and you'd have a flyer in it that was obviously like spin-offs, Richie Rich and all that. When we'd order records from up there, it was always a lot of flyers in the record package, that was sent from all over the country, from different crews or different areas or different scenarios or whatever. And I'm sure that's how we were at least partly introduced to. I think his name was Scottish rapper that F meaning Junior Disball, and Cuz hooked up with just before they did the Underground tape. So that guy, Scottish rapper, and Scottish DJ, whatever, they hooked up with them, and that's what led to them, at least to some extent, doing the Underground tape, I think it was called, was it? I have still got it here somewhere, but that was Matt, right. Junior Disball and Cuz's first release on cassette tape, the Underground tape. So they were the first to release, I suppose, aside from Jaffa, previously in the 80s with MC Eric and stuff. They were the first to release a hip hop that I know, hip hop LP, like, if you know, or it was an EP. I think it was an EP.
Sure.
On cassette. But then we were the first to release vinyl, certainly independently anyway. With Wonky Edge, which came later, which is a bit of a shame, really, because, you know, all these years go by and you've got so many people and crews doing stuff, but nobody's, and that's, you know, I'm going back now to what I was saying about the music industry management side of things, you know? It's like, I think if more of us had more of or more clued up on the industry, I think a lot more of us could have had releases a lot early on. But we were all finding our feet. And of course, we didn't have in Wales, not just Swansea, Cardiff, we didn't have what London had. You know, everybody looked to London, didn't they? And sometimes they still do to some degree, but certainly not like it was then. Everybody looked to London. You've got all your imports, your records, you know, pretty much all the crews are from there, or most of the crews, you know, or at least most of the crews that everybody knew were out. So when F and Cuz did that, I think, again, that was another kick in the ass for us to say, look, it's fucking time, man. It was time 2 years ago. Like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, but we were hanging with them when they were doing that as well. So we just like, what the fuck are we waiting for? So that was a couple of years, maybe two or 3 years before Wonky Edge came out.
More complex than chess. 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 More complex than chess.
So that was the kick in the arse that I knew we were to do it, but I couldn't, at least I felt I couldn't do it without Nobster at that time, you know? I didn't know any other MCs that, you know, because even though graffiti artists and MCs and DJs would hook up, you would rarely find intercity hookups, you know, back then. Certainly not in Wales, you know? So to see, you know, Kaz and Matt, hook up with these Scottish lads, like, you know, to us it was like, wow, it's fucking mind-blowing. That is, that's fucking
Inspiring.
great.
Yeah,
it was inspiring, of course, yeah. So we were like, well, let's do shit with other people. So not only did it allow me to go, do you know what, well, if Nobster doesn't, you know, sort of pick up the pace here and just listen, you know, agree that this is what we want to do and what we're going to do, I will end up finding another MC, which even though we didn't like split up or anything like that at that time, it was another. I will put this down to Matt and the inspiration I had of him doing that tape, and Cuz, of course, for me to find or bring in under our wing other MCs. And I found Shonky through his cousin who I was going out with. And she said, oh, my cousin raps and all that. But when he turned up, he had an American accent and he was rapping like fucking, or trying to rap like LL Cool J and everything, you know? And I was like, whoa, stop, cut that off there now. Right, have you heard our stuff? Oh, jams, yeah? So, right, have you heard any LL Cool J style raps on there? No. You know, so I was like, look, we are us. This is what we do. Wonky Edge, Wonky Wax. Well, not Wonky Edge, Wonky Wax. The Wonky concept is purely based on us being ourselves. So that's what you do. But Shonky always had it. He always had that fire burning inside him. He just never heard or been told by anyone to just be yourself. Don't copy anyone. Be yourself. So I didn't have to teach him shit. All I had to do was tell him to be yourself. And within a day, you know, he came in the morning, let's say, for example, he was rapping like, you know, yo, what's up, man, and all that. And by the night, he was fucking going, all right, man, Shonky boy, fucking man, you know. He was completely himself. He was a natural, absolute natural. And it was well, Boswell wasn't really a rapper at that time. He was just Shonky's mate. But he had the innate ability to do it as well, and he could, you know. But Shonky was the epitome of it for me, and he was like, fuck, man. I was like, you were more Swansea than Nobster is, you know. Nobster is like, to me, I think if he had more lung power, he would be like the Be Real of Wales, you know, because his accent is so like, you know, not his accent, sorry, his vocal tone. It's kind of very nasally. And it's not powerful, you know. But Shonky's voice was powerful and quite overwhelming. So he was much more punchy, whereas Nobster again, the same with mics, whether it be recording or live or whatever. We always had to have people turn his mics up because he just didn't have the lung power that Chonky had. So yeah, Matt and Cuz influenced us enough for us to kick us in the arse. Even though there's a little gap between that and our Wonky Heads release, we were doing it pretty much straight after, Straight after they did that tape, we were in Grassroots, we started recording the album. But because of ins and outs of life and, certain people like not turning up or, mention names but people just don't turn up and then you have to and then I have to go back to being the driving force again and say, right, come on, are you fucking doing this or not, And that was the reason why, it took a few years to do that. But hats off to Matt and Cuz for doing that. So, of course, when we were going to release the vinyl of it, we were like, we've got to get you guys on it. You are part of who we were. The Killer Whales thing came, I suppose, later, but only as a concept because we were a crew. And we thought, well, look, you were Matt and F, Underground, even though it was the Underground tape. I don't even know if they had a crew name at the time. I don't think they did. But you were sort of that crew over there. We had this crew over here. Why aren't we one big crew? And do you know what? I think it might have been Cuz that came up with Killer Whales, because I can tell you now, I don't think I came up with it. I can't remember coming up with it at all. I'm sure it was DJ Cuz that came up with Killer Whales, the Killer Whales concept, But people kind of came in and out of that. It was never like, oh yeah, this is us, 7 of us, we are Killer Whales. It was just whoever got involved with us, At the time, that was from Wales, and that would come up and jump on a gig or do this or do that. There's a few people that came in, did some stuff with us when we, I wouldn't say released stuff, but yeah, when we did jams or we were putting stuff out there, whatever. They were Killer Whales, but they were Killer Whales for a short period because they were kind of in and out,
So for anybody that doesn't know, who made up the Killer Whales?
Again, I'm trying to think of, it was definitely Matt. You saw the models I put online by Mark Williams. Yeah. He at that period, he made them because that's who we were the amounts. We had Boswell, Shonky, Cuz, F, and myself. So we were the people in that side of hip hop in Cardiff, Grassroots, that era of recording that were doing it the most, for us. I'm sure there were other people doing it here and there, but as a crew of MCs, producers, DJs, artists, that was most of us. But other people did come in. Jaffa came in and we considered him a part of Killer Whales at one point, but he of course had his own thing going on. So it depends on who was involved within that era, from Matt's Underground tape up until Chonky's release, which just came after Headcase release. Got it. And then that was the end of Killer Whales. But no one discussed the end of Killer Whales. It was just like we all just got on with our own thing then, It wasn't like, oh, Killer Whales is over, man. It was just like, Killer Whales was just a group of people together in a period of time because we just happened to be from Wales. And like I say, I'm convinced. I'll have to, maybe if I can get hold of Cuz one day, maybe I'll have to ask him, was it you that actually came up with Killer Whales? Because it wasn't me. I'm convinced it was Cuz. It might have been Matt. I'm not sure, but I'm convinced it was Cuz. And he came up with it because of that. Because we were all together, and obviously it's a great name in the context of Wales, and obviously Killer Whales, as in orcas. So yeah, we were like, yeah, fuck it, let's do that. Plus, at the time, we were getting offered gigs away because people had, we were getting reviews. Well, obviously, Cuz was getting reviews on Matt with the Underground tape, and then before Wonky Heads was out, we were sending demos of Wonky Heads out. So we were probably sending demos of Wonky Heads out 97, and then people were getting back to us. Oh, you got to do a gig up here, man, Sheffield, and you got to do this and you got to do that. So we were having gigs away, in other cities and other countries, and I think that solidified us saying, yeah, fuck it, well, because it's all of us, like the Sheffield gig at the Boardwalk and Ponana with New Flesh for Old and all that. We didn't want to say Headcase Lads because it wasn't just us, because people were on stage with us that weren't in the Headcase Lads. So we thought, well, let's not advertise it really as the Headcase Lads. one or two of the gigs were, but that wasn't really, that was the promoters who put it on, and when we turned up, that's what they'd done, and we were like, well, we thought we were going to put Killer Whales, or they put Headcase Ladz, and then underneath and Killer Whales, and then the rest of the crew, like, but yeah, so the gigs and things like that, we call ourselves Killer Whales in Grassroots Studio as a laugh, it was nothing like, yeah, right, and we didn't sit down and go, right, we are Killer Whales, guys, The concept was come up, and then when the gigs came around, we thought, well, we might as well use this because we're all doing it. We sort of all went with it, just went with the flow. It wasn't a meeting over it or nothing,
It really goes back to that collective energy you were talking about earlier. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, the Wonky Edge album was created by everyone who was on it, Most albums, you get a guest. All right, let's forget about nowadays, because most guests on albums nowadays, the people who are making the albums have never met the fucking guest. It's all through online and all that, or they paid someone to be on there or whatever. But back then, there was none of that shit. You wouldn't have people from other cities. Like Jay, when Matt and Cuz did that album, Jay, I can't remember the other guy's name now. I feel a bit rude about that, but because I've still got his tape. But they came down from Scotland, they met the boys, and I mean, Cuz and Matt may have even gone up to Scotland to meet them, but I know they came down. So it wasn't like, there's no internet then, so you couldn't really do it, through the post. You can't meet people through the post, can you? You can kind of half meet people online now, or you can do Skypes or whatever. But back then, you had to meet people, you had to hook up with people if you were going to do something with someone,
Yeah.
So of course there was that energy then of people coming together, which, going back to what I said earlier on, it creates whatever you're doing, whether it's the breakdancing, whether it's the graffiti, whether it's the MCing, whether it's the DJ. You feed off others to make yourself better. So yeah, absolutely. Killer Whales was and the Wonky Edge album, and even the Shonky album, it wasn't Headcase, it wasn't Shonky. Every one of those releases should have just been called Killer Whales, because they all put into it, they all put into that album. Even though I was a driving force, certainly behind the stuff that we did, because I think if I wouldn't have pushed people to turn up at the jams, or if I wouldn't have booked Grassroots Studio, or if I wouldn't have, booked the pressing plant or whatever, it would just never have happened. You had to have a driving force of someone being pushy enough to actually get things done, or actually say to people, look, do you want to do this or do you not want to do this? Because if it wasn't for me, or if it wasn't for someone else who was a driving force somewhere else, those things just would never come about. It's just, that's fact, across the board with everybody, hip hop crews, hip hop acts, LL Cool J, I don't know, I'm just giving an example. He might not have been the driving force within everything that was released for him, It might have been, one of the Earl, it might have been Earl, who knows? But it would have been one of them, Cut Creator, whatever. It would have been one of them. It probably was him. I'm just giving an example. You wouldn't have had all of them that would have been the driving force, One of them would have to be the driving force to push the others to get on with stuff. Otherwise, people just start falling by the wayside, and life starts getting in the way, and you don't take things as seriously. So that's kind of been me up until, I don't know, not Wonky Edge per se, and not Get a Life album per se, but certainly up until 2012, where I met who was my ex now and had my daughter and all that. That's when I just I didn't sit there and decide, right, I've given up hip hop. I've always made dribs and drabs, and I've always uploaded this and that and the other, but it's just a different era. It's a different feeling. It's a different thing going on now. Like I say, loads of people hook up online. Not many people meet anymore. So all these guest slots are done by people send. They rap in their bedroom and they send the WAV to them. It's it's different. It's not the same. Yeah. It's not the same to me, as it was in what the culture started out to be. I like to hook up with people and to do stuff in the flesh. Which doesn't happen nowhere near as much as it should, really. But then it's not going to make me stop it. I've still got. I've got something in the pipeline now, an album which is pretty much finished, which has got like 12 guests on it. From America, people in America to people all over the UK that are famous within hip hop. I just, it's a couple of years old and it's not entirely finished, but I will get it finished. It's just, I think if I put the idea out there now that I'm going to do it, and then it takes years again, people just forget about it, So I haven't told anybody yet. So that's an exclusive, that is.
Yeah, what's happening? This is Butcher Cuz. I'm your producer, your DJ for today. And you're listening to Radio KUNT FM. On today's selection, we got the dubious one, the Messiah. We got the fog to the scratch to the leg. We got Shonky, the three-legged donkey. Boswell, straight out of Roswell. And we got Dek Masha Slice.
Hey, what about me, man? What am I, job living?
And of course, how can I forget the fantastic Knobster Nut? This is a track called Straight from the Donkey's Mouth. Kicks like a mule.
I got some introductions on some dubious functions. Balls blow bubblegum, knob shoot a spud gun. Butcher up with Cuz's production. And rips tracks make whackers change careers. You stain the ass kissing A in our ass. We kicks like a mule, prepare for the do. The end is nigh, getting radio wonky on new golden light. So fuck off and die. Turn out the lead, stylus pumps in your head. Make you up brown bread. When you listen to it on your Sony bloody walk. Next day 2 1 3.
What are your recollections of recording Absurdisms and elevating your production to new heights with that project specifically? Do you have any stories from that time capsule?
Okay. Flipping from obviously Wonky Ed Shonky, because we didn't do anything from then, which was 97, 98 release. And then, of course, we did the gigs. So 98, 99. I couldn't say that we did any gigs 2000. And then we had that, there was that lull, for me, main reason being, again, Knobster, knapsack on your back, off on the road. Where's Knobster? Where's Knobster? Trying to ring up. He was going through his own shit, his own problems, and he deals with it in his own way, in that way, And I never resented him for that. He would just pick off. But at that period, because of what happened prior in the context of us spending so many years to try and get our own shit out there, and him having a break and all that, but not sitting down and saying, I'm having a break, man, just disappearing, I couldn't find him, because there's no mobile phones then, so it'd be like, who do I fucking ring? Where is he? Really frustrating. So he went not straight after Wonky Years. We did obviously the Sheffield gigs, and we did that, we did a little UK tour of sorts. We played in Bristol and in Cardiff and whatever, and then it sort of went a bit quiet. But I don't know what the reason is, but Knobster's had one in the right place or whatever. So he was off on the road and we couldn't find him. And because, like what I was saying to you about me being a people person, and I work better when I'm doing stuff with people and doing it with people and feeding off people and vice versa, I just missed it too much, I think by that point, Shonky had pretty much, he'd thrown it in. He wasn't doing it anymore. I think, if not that, end of like 99, 2000, if not then, certainly a couple of years later, definitely, he started working for a game company. I don't play games, fucking Xbox and all this malarkey, or computer games or whatever, but a really big one, really big game company, well known. And he went to work for them, programming, making games, So
who was the company? Can you remember the name?
I think it began with an E. I don't know if any companies come to ring any bells. It begin with an E.
Okay.
Eon, it's not Eon's an electric company. It was one of, if not to this day, one of the biggest gaming companies out there. So
EA?
EA, maybe, yeah.
EA Games.
Challenge everything.
So it was a big company, and he and I only heard about that because the reason we first hooked up, because I used to go out with his cousin, and she told me, because I was wondering where the hell he'd gone as well. I was like, what's that with Shonky? What, he's had enough of all that now. He's doing the game. So to him, it was just it was no serious in hip hop with Shonky. Despite the fire and the talent that he had, a fucking immense talent. It was just a fly-by moment for him, really. Nothing more serious than him being into hip hop growing up, and then suddenly doing it, and then thinking, well, we're just jamming and messing about, And then he moved on to EA Games. Yeah, that's coming to me now. EA Games. Battlefield, all that,
Yeah.
Have you heard of that? Yeah. The company that owns all that. Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah, huge. So he was programming for them, and I heard about that through his cousin. So I'm like, well, there you go. He's found his feet. So I just started to realize, look, I'm solo here, and I got to make a choice. Do I now do the same thing that I did leading up to Wonky Heads, and chase people who do or who either do or don't want to do this like I want to do it, or do I just push myself into a direction where I'm doing it for me? So now at this point now, I was re-meeting a few people in Swansea that I'd grew up with from the past or bumped into or come across from the past, friends of friends, known them for years, but not really hung out that much per se, that were by this point in bands, like musical bands, rock, funk, whatever. And I was just like, do you know what? And again, I hadn't heard any DJ in a band at that point. There might have been, what was that sort of rock, not metal band, Faith No More. Did Faith No More have a DJ? I think if they didn't in its entirety, they might have used one at some point or whatever. I'm sure it's Faith No More.
What year is this?
This is, Faith No More, probably late 90s if they were to use a DJ like that.
Right.
Because obviously when I'd come to this point, meeting these guys, which eventually led me to being Goatboy.
That's right.
I was still hip hop, I was hip hop in Goatboy. I was hip hop leading up to Goatboy, and I was hip hop after Goatboy split. But Nobster was nowhere to be seen, and I had to make a decision. Do I now wait at the risk? Because I couldn't get a hold of him. Because, like I said, it was I didn't have a mobile phone, or I don't even think they existed. If they did, they were fucking giant bricks, and there's certainly no internet that I could get access to or what have you, if it did exist. And I just couldn't get a hold of him. So I knew where he lived, but he was never there. So I left a note through his door saying, look, I love you and everything, but, don't take offense, but I can't fucking wait about for you anymore. I'm joining a band, Goatboy. But if you do ever turn up whenever, know that Headcase is always my number one. Which is why we ended up releasing Funky Fresh and Absurdisms, because even though by that point I was in Goatboy, he then turned up. His infamous self, as it would do, just fucking Houdini out of nowhere. And I'd be like, fuck, where have you been, man? And what the fuck? And he's like, not, jealous or nothing in any way, but I'm like, look, man, I'm in Goatboy now. I said, but look, like I said, man, because I think what happened is he'd moved from that bedsit where I used to live, coincidentally, on the street that they, have you seen Twin Town?
A long time ago.
Yeah, the first scene, as soon as it opens, they go driving down a hill and they, massive steep hill, and they take off in a car, that street. I lived on that street.
Okay. When
they were making that film as well. And he lived up the road from that street, on the same street. So I couldn't get hold of him. He was just never there. So I left a note through his door saying, I'm going to join a band because I'd met Nick and the boys, and they'd asked me, do you want to join us, And my mind was fried. It was just like, I don't know if I join you now. Am I saying goodbye to hip hop and goodbye to Headcase? It was up until that point. It was all my life,
Yeah.
And I was really nervous. I was like, what do I do? What do I do? So I made the decision. I said, yeah, I'm gonna join you because I can't wait like this anymore. I just want to make music, And so I wrote him a letter, and it turns out the landlord, knew he'd moved, obviously, but he just hadn't told me for whatever reason he moved. And he forwarded the letter to him. So he got a letter. Didn't come rushing back to Swansea, mind. It was like a half a year or year into me playing with Goatboy before he came back. And of course, when he saw us playing, he was blown away. Nobster was. He was like, "Wow, that's fucking amazing. That's amazing. I'm so glad for you." And I said, "Look, we signed to Mike Yatum and everything now. And if you're up for it, because Headcase was always in my heart. It was like it was always there. It was never going to go away." And I said to him, I said, "Look, if you're serious again about Headcase, I'll get us a deal with Mike Yatum." And he's like, "Yeah, but they're a rock label." And I said, "Well, fuck that. It just means they can release records for us. Who gives a fuck what label they are?" You know what I mean? Because we didn't have, really have money, or at least, we could have saved up, but we didn't want to go down that road again, and release shit ourselves and all that. So we were like, if we, and not just that, the most important thing about anything is distribution. I feel you can have as much money as you want, but the distribution is so hard. Getting it to other countries and this and that and the other, and having to spend so much time, which I had to do it all. I had to do the management, I had to do the PR, I had to do the producing, I had to do the organising, and like I was back to what I was saying earlier on, driving force. It wasn't just as simple as making a record and yeah, we are done now. Someone had to drive the van around the fucking UK to drop them off to the record shops, and that would have been me, like
That was you.
Yeah, so when I joined Goatboy and he came down, that's what started us with absurdisms of Funky Fresh. And I think I convinced the guys on the label by showing them all we'd previously done. I didn't lie to them. I said, look, we are an underground band, so don't expect to make fucking millions off us. They'd actually talked to the same people after we released Funky Fresh, which was just a second release on the label. They'd spoken to people, Roger, the manager and one of the owners, the same people that gave Goldie Looking Chain their deal, and they wanted to give us a deal. So Roger kind of spoke on my behalf, really, because he knew what I was like, and he said, right, let me just tell you out right now. He's not just a band. He studied music industry management. He knows about the industry. And the guy turned around and said to him this. He told me this, Roger did. He said, the guy turned around and said, so he knows that we won't give him full artistic rights then. And Roger said, yeah, that's right. And he said, well, we can't offer him a deal then. Which is what Goldie Looking Chain took. This is why they lost most of their money, or at least, recoup, because the album didn't recoup money. I know that from insider talk, but that's another subject. But yeah, so we didn't take the deal because we knew they would have wanted to mold us into this fucking Spice Girls of rap, And which is what Eggsy said on the phone when we interviewed him in the guest list. He was in the other room screaming on the phone, going, "You fucking trying to turn us into the fucking Spice Girls?" He was on the phone. We love them guys. They fucking bomb. They used to come to our gigs and everything when they released the first two white label.
Really?
Yeah. The first two white label presses they released themselves. They used to come and watch our gigs and everything. So yeah, they used to follow us and stuff. Lovely guys like that. There's only 3 of them, the original ones. All the 12 are just fucking mates that got on stage.
Yeah,
and
something like that.
Yeah, because the darkness saw them, they thought they were the whole band, the whole act, but they weren't. So anyway, it's another story. So yeah, lovely guys. They followed us. They were inspired by us and all that. And the dealer they had, they kind of offered us through Mighty Atom with it. Roger, because Roger's so purpose, and it happened with. Have you had a funeral for a friend?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. They were on Mighty Atom, and exactly the same happened with them. But the difference was, I say the difference. They ripped Roger off. Not funeral for a friend, but Sony or fucking whoever took them. Sony came around and said to them directly, he said, look, if you don't sign a band over us, we're just going to take them. They're that powerful, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you'll have nothing. So Roger had to agree to credits and Mighty Atom being on the back of their albums, and that's it. So he didn't really make much money from them. And he was the one that created them. He created Funeral for a Friend. He did all their first stuff before Sony with them. And so that's, in that context, that's what they were trying to do with us. But the difference was, Roger knew I would have just said, fuck you. Fuck, what are you offering me? Like, you know what I mean? You can offer me 100 million. Unless you give me full artistic rights, I will not be your pop band, So this is going back to what people used to say about us. And
original No Sellout Boys.
The original No Sellout Boys, yeah. We just, there's no amount of money anyone could have offered us if they wanted to mold us into something we weren't, because we spent so many years being us. That's what made us us,
Yeah.
And we didn't want to be someone else's puppet. So and some people turn around and say, oh, but you could have released all these out. And I said, look, never mind the coulda, woulda, shouldas. We've done what we've done, and we
on your own terms.
On our own terms, and we've got a history which is more than in most people I know. And not just the people that are into hip hop, but most people I know across the board, full stop. Most people I know just get up, go to work, come home, watch Coronation Street, get up, go home. You know what I mean? That's what their lives consist of. Fucking look at my life. Look at our lives. Look at what we've done. If you can't look back at your life with and be happy with the things you've done, And certainly with the talents you're given naturally, because I've been an artist since I was a kid. I used to do portraits when I was 5 and 6, and so I was naturally artistically gifted. And I think if anybody has that ability and doesn't use it, I really feel sorry for them. I really do. Maybe something stopping them. I don't know what, but if you have talent, use it. It's been given to you by, whether you want to call it God or whatever. It's been given to you. It's in your bones. Use it.
It's a privilege. Absolutely.
A privilege. Yeah.
Going back to absurdisms for a second, I do want to talk about this specifically and that creation, because you've elevated your production at this point. How would you typically create a vibe with Knobster at the studio making that project?
Well, by that point, I'd already been in Goatboy a couple of years.
Right.
So I was now not just in a band, for the first time, but experiencing outright musicians. Discussing stuff with them, as a DJ, which even if there was DJs in Faith No More or, what's that Fred Durst band? I can't remember the name now.
Limp Bizkit
or whatever, right? Which DJ Lethal, which he was in House of Pain and stuff like that as well. I can pretty much tell you this for a fact, purely based on observation, that they don't interact with them in a musical way. They just scratch. It's just a typical fresh or them kind of cuts. But I was never like that with Goatboy. I always used to use musical parts. So it took me to a whole new level, not just within creating music, but within the production of it as well. Even though I'd done music industry management and I knew how to use a mixing desk and stuff like that, I'd only ever done it with hip hop, with loops, with hooks, maybe drum machines and stuff like that. So to then do it with live music, and then say maybe get some of the boys playing some riffs for me and then looping them and then treating that loop not like hip hop, but in a hip hop made way, but not in a hip hop production or engineering way. I then treat it like a band. So that's where the sound changed for us as well. If you listen to Absurdisms, I think aside from maybe Anom's one, Massive Insect, which is an instrumental, the rest on there are not outright live, but they've got more of an umphy liveness to them, if you like, compared to what Wonky had, which was pretty much mostly or entirely sample bass and drum machines,
Yeah.
So definitely, there's definitely that, crossover. And of course, Knobster would just, he would adapt to wherever as an MC, because to him, he's just rapping over, sort of loops, music, whatever. But from my point of view, not just as a DJ, but as obviously by that point, a musician and engineer and producer and God knows whatever else. My perspective had just widened immensely, which is another reason why I started using instruments later on and up to now a little bit, guitars, banjo, like Absurdisms. I played the fucking electric mandolin on it, I don't know if anybody knows that. I can check that in the notes. Mandolin played by me. Original Wonky Heads, and I'm trying to think of the names of the other ones on the EP. There was 2 I played electric mandolin on. One was through a wah-wah or an effects pedal, and one was straight, or I put an effect on it on the desk. So I would never have done. I would never have even fucking dreamt of doing that if I hadn't been in a band. You know what I mean? It would have always been samples or drum machines.
What's interesting about those songs is that it's really hard to make the distinction between what's actually live instrumentation and what isn't.
Yeah. I get you on that one. I feel within Goatboy, certainly one of the tracks in particular. I'm trying to think of the name of it now. There's one track where me and Nick, we put the track together pretty much before the drummer and the bass and all that come in. And, praise to Nick for this, the guitarist and singer. Now, I picked the sounds, or I think it was a Jimi Hendrix album, where Jimi Hendrix was letting rip, a guitar riff, or whatever like that. And I would transform it, bend it, put it through a wah it and stuff like that. And he was like, look, let's do this back and forth like you were a guitar. So when we recorded it, people to this day, I don't think, realize that I'm actually cutting on that track. I think they must think it's Nick playing a guitar. but it's not. I've actually a bunch of the tracks on there like that. Some of them are outright hip hop. Like The Beast That Licked Me is me doing 1 for the treble, 2 for the bass. You can hear me cut in on that. But there's 1 or 2 others on there that predominantly are me playing back and forth with Nick on the guitar. And you can't tell that I'm cutting on the track at all because it's musical. So that was aside from that, The Beast That Licked Me track, which was pretty much hip hop funk. All the rest on there are rock or combination of jazz, drum and bass, you know, a mixture of musics put together. That what I'm cutting, you know, noises. I'm not cutting any typical hip hop breaks really that you could recognize. They all blend in with the music together. So I absolutely definitely crossed that over a little bit, probably unintentionally, if I'm honest with you, just because it was becoming a part of who I was, you know. I crossed that over into Headcase and stuff, and that became even more so when Lou came on the scene later on, because Lou is a practiced musician, like, you know, you can play pretty much fucking anything, like, but it's sax and anything wind, but mainly sax. He was the dog's bollocks at, like, and so. He loved me with the decks. He was blown away with the deck side of things, and probably because of what I just said about me using just completely wacky, different outside the box cuts, which I got to be honest with you, I haven't heard anybody, even to this day, do it. I still haven't heard anybody within hip hop use cuts off albums that are not hip hop. They all use like these hip hop battle break albums, or do you know what I mean? I don't know if you agree or not. I mean, if you've heard anything, I'd love to fucking hear it. I really would. And I haven't heard every single record or album out there that's hip hop, obviously, and I'm sure someone must have done it as well. But it became me as an entirety then. You know, I just pretty much stopped using the typical fresh and the fucking 1, 2, 3 and breakdown and all that sort of stuff. I mean, when we were live as well, bear in mind, because there was no DJs to the extent of what I was doing within bands in the UK, when we were touring and stuff, and I'm not joking with this, nearly every venue, and we played fucking thousands of venues, you know. We played Glastonbury. John Peel introduced us on Glastonbury the year before he died. You know, he phoned us up in Mighty Atom, and I answered the phone because I worked in Mighty Atom as well. I did graphics for him as well, and I did a bit of engineering. And created websites and everything as well. But so the phone rings, John Peel on the other end of the phone. And I'm just like, you know, he's my fucking hero, like, you know. I'm like, what
was that conversation like?
Oh man, long. And he was like, I've got to go. But it started off, right, because we did a session for him, Goatboy, and it was that night that it was meant. I think it was that night, was it? Or it was the night before, I think it was meant to go live. And we were sitting waiting for it, you know, to play, and nothing happens. Oh, sorry, his show comes on. And then at the end of the show, I think it's Joe Wiley or someone saying, right, just to let you know, that was an older recording of John Peel because his aerial fell off his roof. That was the first time we realized that John Peel didn't do his shows from Radio 1. He did his shows from home. He's the only DJ that Radio 1 let do that, apparently. Well, up to that time when he died, anyway. Maybe they do now, but up to that point, all DJs had to DJ or did DJ from Radio 1. John P was the only DJ that DJed from home, and had the privilege given to him to do that. So his aerial fell off his roof, and that's what the phone call was about. So he's like, I'm really sorry. He said, just to let, because we were gutted as fuck. We were like, why is he, what the fuck? So even though she said the aerial fell off the roof, we were just obviously spinning out. We were like, shit, is that the real reason? Or does he just not want to play the show and all that? Because we were his favorite band leading up to the year he died. You know, he said that in his show. He said they are the top of my list at the moment to go by. He said, I fucking love him. He used to play us every day. And anyway, he rang us up and he said, yeah, I'm really sorry. The aerial fell off the roof. I had a fucking bit of a storm here and all that. And he said, and it was just as I was about to go live as well and put you guys on, like, and of course, I couldn't just let this conversation end with him explaining that. I just ended up chatting to him. I said, look, man, I remember you playing Tila Rock Back to Burn in 1986 and fuck, that was it, done. I'm done. I'm like, oh my God, you know, and he's laughing and he said, oh, I love your accent and the fact you're just rolling it off and the passion that's coming from you. It was just something I'll never forget. You know, we were in his book and everything. Like, he wrote about us in one of his books. So yeah, it's a real big honor that was, you know.
Summertime, everybody goes away on holiday. They've been saving up their pay. I was 25 before I ever went abroad, and we used to go to Butlins. That was all we could afford. This year we gonna get the heads together. We're going to the seaside, depending on the weather. It's the Jolly Boys outing. We're all excited. All the wonky wax compadres are invited. We got slabs of beers, bags of tortillas, shouts and cheers when Black Blue Tower appears in the distance. Time to lock up your daughters. We're talking all the fluff on the seafront and they're gorgeous. Let's jump the gear and see the sights. Knock it two slots, start and fight. You wishing one hand and clapping the other, and see which gets filled first, brother. We going blind as good as the rest. It's time to let your hair down, but you get it off your chest. I got the knotted handkerchief and string vest. Old bull chest, never had such a quest in Blackpool. Such a beautiful place. It's nice to have a chance to get away from the rat race and breathe in the clean scene.
Let's talk about Get a Life, which comes out in 2005. Another release which was completely unique and only could have been made in Wales. How does that come about?
Yeah, I think even though it was people like the Herbalizer, I mean, going back to Funky Fresh and Absurdism, it was Absurdism first and then it was Funky Fresh on Mighty Atom. Right. Obviously, I had the utilization or the ability, especially because up to that point, I worked so hard with PR management, you know, nagging the shit out of people on the phone to pay attention to us. You know, for years, from the time I did music industry management in uni, which is what I was taught, you know, part of the uni course, and especially my tutor was amazing, used to give us tips and things like that. And he's like, look, when someone fobs you off on the phone and they put the phone down or you finish a conversation, ring them straight back. You know, do their fucking head in. Make sure that even if they don't give you the deal at the end of that, they're not going to forget you or that for 20 or 30 phone calls for fucking 5 years. Your name will stick in their head. So when you do something next, a month or 2 or 3 months later, because the thing with A&Rs and labels and stuff like that, it's their job to remember those people. They're the people that they remember on purpose and are taught to remember because they are the ones that are the driving forces. At least that's what I was taught and told. And I kind of agreed as well, because when I was doing that, you know, I annoyed the shit out of a lot of people in the industry to get us something or here or there or whatever. And I'm not talking about major deals or nothing like that. I'm talking about how we got distribution with Pinnacle, you know, eventually before, you know, obviously Mighty Atom and all that with Wonky Edge in the end. Because even though we did the van around the country, dropping them off the record shops and shit like that, I did manage to get a small amount off to Pinnacle, and I can't remember another distributor. It's a distributor in the Isle of Wight as well. Actually, I didn't threaten him, but I was very strong with him because I wouldn't say promise, but he made all these assurances. And in the end, I made a phone call and I said, look, we're fucking coming down there tomorrow, right? Are you ready? I got your fucking address here. And within 2 days, he sent a fucking check to buy the whole lot. Wow. He said, and you know, he bought all the rest off us. So all I'd like to think is that he did actually manage to get him out there rather than just leave him in his garage. Yeah. But I think he was scared of us. And I drove to fucking Isle of Wight as well. Me and Officer did. To meet him and everything. Shady, his name was, funnily enough.
Do you think that was a perception you guys battled with a lot?
Yeah, people, and I think it was a bad choice of fucking name title, band title. Headcase Ladz was, I think, as well. Wonky Edge was where we should have left it with a different shit on the shelf, or Wonky Wax or whatever. But we carried on with the Wonky Wax, saying, yeah, because we're Headcases, we're nutters, But of course, everyone outside our box doesn't necessarily, look upon that as how we see it, or how we interpret it as the Headcase Ladz. To us, the Headcase Ladz wasn't that we were fucking hard psychopath nutters. I mean, I'll tell you something now in a minute. I think I might have told you previously, you laugh your head off, how we got the deal with the Zebra Traffic. But yeah, so people outside our bubble box, whether it be in Wales or England or even America, as soon as they hear that name, they just think that we're fucking psychos. You know, not headcase as in, or headers. Oh, yeah, they're headers, you know, and just fob it off. They would think that we were fucking psychos. Don't fuck with them down our mind. I'm like, why? What's giving you that impression? You know, have we ever beaten anyone up? You know? No. It's like, no one ever admitted it because of the name. And one person partially admitted it, and that was Will Ashen, who runs Big Dada. And he said, you know, he loves us. He loved us to bits. You know, I remember speaking to him a couple of times, very briefly, and we met him once, one of the gigs. And I think he actually said it in one of the, I think he mentioned this in one of the reviews as well after mentioning it to me. He said, look, your name, man. He said, everything is right about you, except for your name. He said, I just don't like the name, like, you know, Headcase Ladz. And I think they would have signed us as well before Zebra Traffic if we had a different name. I even said to Nobs, should we just change our fucking name, man? But by that point, we've been Headcase for so long, I just thought, you know, would it work if we changed the name? And, you know, and, we were just playing with that so much, and we just thought, fuck it, just stay Headcase, like, you know. So I agreed to a big degree that you know, and it even got to the point where I thought, I didn't even know I like it myself, you know. I said, let's just call us Knobs and Us and Slicer Man. It's just fuck the group name. It's just Knobs and Us and Slicer Man. You know, because to me that was like that was even an even older school hip hop vibe about it. You know,
very much a throwback to those days.
For the 80s, yeah. Right. And, but we never, you know, we did talk about it in the future, doing it and doing an album and just titling it that. But obviously that never came about. But yeah, so the name was definitely determined how people perceived us and leading to the Zebra Traffic deal with Will Quantic. They were terrified of us, you know. I mean, Li, who, you know, he didn't get us the deal, but because obviously Will Quantic and Rob from the label had heard of us. We've been name checked everywhere by everyone in the UK, especially. And obviously the Herbalizer and Blade and all that, when they were asking them, what's the crap with these boys? And every one of them said, fucking bollocks, you need to sign them now. You know, don't lose them, like. And so that's what led them to eventually, because they knew Li from the Aspects, who I'm not even sure were the actual Aspects at the time. Yeah, yes, they were, but they hadn't been Aspects for long, or at least not in a bigger release sense. But Li, I love him to bits. Lovely guy, Ian, you know. But his words were, them football hooligans down there. I know, I've never fucking liked football in my entire life. You know what I mean? I fucking hate it. So I'm like, you could only have got that from the name, because they'd met us, and yeah, we were like nutty boys having a laugh, we were forward, but we never at any point ever meeting anyone did we beat anyone up. You know what I mean? Or fucking act like psychopaths or threaten anyone or none of that. We were just, I don't know, we were just kind of eccentric, you know, and the way we dress, the way we look, the way we'd act, but never ever nutty in a fighty or naughty sense like that, you know. So the only impression I could put it down to is the name of the group, you know, Headcase Ladz. So because of that, when Will Quantic got in touch with Li, and I think it was because Will Quantic's gran lives in Carmarthen, or certainly into Wales from Swansea, because he was going through Swansea to his gran's for Christmas that year. And I think that's why he got in touch with Li, because he was going through Bristol on the way down here, asking him, do you know the Headcase Ladz? And that's when Li said, yeah, they fucking nutters, man, lunatics, man, fucking football hooligans. And he was terrified to meet us. So we had to actually go to fucking Brighton to sign the deal, because he wouldn't, you know, he was too scared to come down. Like, or at least this is what we hear from. I think it was Rob actually from the label that told us. Yeah, you know, in a light-hearted way, not terrified of us, because obviously if he's terrified of us and he thinks we are fucking that much of a bunch of psychopaths, why the fuck would he want to sign us? You know. So I don't know. We just thought we were just going to be fucking right over the top, heavy and what have you, you know, and. No, of course we weren't. We were more comedic than anything else, you know. Certainly our live shows, anyway, and all that side of us. But in person, like the Welsh are, compared to, no offense to the English, we're open-armed, you know. We're like, come in, have a cup of tea, sit down, come on, yay, you know. Rarely does that happen in England. You walk down the street in England, you look at someone in the eye, and they think you're going to fucking mug them. At least that's what's happened to us over the years, you know. It's like it was attempted mugging 17 times when we went to London and shit like that. And fucking crazy. Like, never had that happen to us in Wales. You know, it was always like, fucking hell, come on, boys, come and sit down and have a cup of tea in there, man. You know, we're much more open-armed as a culture down here, and we allow people into our lives easier than away. Whether that's because there's too much multiculturalism away and people are just, you know, split apart too much, I don't know, but definitely different, definitely warmer down here. And yeah, so he went to his nan's, but he didn't come to meet us in Swansea, and that's when Rob said, yeah, look, it's probably best you come down here. Will's he's going to see his nan in Christmas, and he just wants he wanted a chilled meeting, and I'm like, well, yeah, it'll be a chilled meeting. And he's like, yeah, but you know, he thinks you're a bit fucking off the cuff, like. And I'm like, no, not at all, man. I said, look, don't worry, it's cool. We'll make it a weekend out. We come to Brighton, that's all good. So yeah, we went to Brighton. Now we were meant to have a 3-album deal, but I won't get into the nitty-gritty details too much about that. But yeah, we stuck with a 1-album deal because things came about where people were unsure if they were going to still be about doing it, you know. And I was like, all right, and we'll just ride the wave on this 1 album. But we could have had a 3-album deal if more people around me were as much of a driving force as I was. But by that point, I was just like, you know what? I'm not fed up, but I'll just go with it because I'm so happy that we're on this label, whether it's 1 album or 10 albums. I just don't care. You know, I was, you know, inside me was worn out with the chasing people around factor, let's say. And by that point then, I not given up, but I was like, I'm not doing it anymore. I'm not doing the whole package, the PR man, the management, the fucking, you know, I just want to make music now, you know, because I enjoyed it so much with Goatboy. But I didn't have to do any of that. You know, all I did with Goatboy was make music and put my heart and soul into that's why we were so diverse, because I didn't, and that's why we weren't as diverse and, how could I put it? And we didn't have as much stuff out with Headcase because I had to do so much other stuff other than just making the music that it probably stifled my chance to be able to make or make more tracks that we could choose from to make more albums from. Does that make sense?
It does.
We had more demos than we did have actual professional tracks, you know. And so yeah, with the Get a Life, we just decided to go with a 1-album deal, 1 album and 1 single instead of 3 albums. Because, but part of me does. I don't like the word regret, you know, because we all make choices that lead us to where we are, and you know those choices are made, and that's that. When you regret stuff, and you know,
they become lessons, don't they?
Yeah, but you know, you're talking about being another person, and anyway, it's like I am who I am. So,
right.
Unless you hate yourself, obviously, which I don't. So I don't regret anything, but I do kind of wish that we did take the 3-album deal because I think it would have maybe pushed Knobster to be more professional for longer, if that makes sense.
What was it about that album specifically for you that was such an enjoyable experience?
In a lot of similar ways to Wonky, as Get a Life didn't happen in the studio like in a few months. There was tracks on there that had started off as jams, not many years before, mind you, you know, but certainly because Get a Life was released in 2005, and I was in Goatboy around 2000, maybe end of 1999, and Knobster was off doing his thing or whatever, and then when he did come back down, you know, we were in the middle of recording the Goatboy album and doing gigs and whatnot. So it took a few months, maybe a year of that before we even entertained, or you know, I even entertained the idea that we could get us on that label and do some stuff. So when we did, in between that time and the release of Get a Life, because it happened quite quickly because we already had it. We already had Get a Life. We didn't make Get a Life because Evertaffic signed us. We'd already made Get a Life. Right. We pretty much completed. You know, we were on the verge of making an album. We hadn't called it Get a Life at that point. But most of the tracks were done down Lew's or in mine or in Stough's. You know what I mean? Mr. Stouff, in different people's, they were jams that had ended up turning into professional tracks that because I had utilization of the Mighty Atom, 36 or 48 channel desk that used to be actually the desk that was owned and used by Jane's Addiction. because Joe Gibb, who helped us engineer it, Joe Gibb engineered Catatonia, fucking Left Field. The list goes on. He's engineered so many famous people. So, well, he actually ended up working in Mighty Am. So he helped us with the album and the engineering as well. You know, no credits on there really for him because he didn't actually do it. You know, it was me that was doing it, but he was a massive help to me. And yeah, so he helped me take tracks from what were bedroom jams per se, you know what I mean, and help sort of filter them down to make them sound, because I wasn't into that, let's clean this up shit, you know what I mean? It's like, I liked, if it was dirty, what I needed from Joe was to make that dirty accessible and obviously listenable on a level where, you know, you're not turning it up in your hi-fi and go, oh, fuck, turn that down, you know? Kind of like Edan, you know, Mega Rapper, you know, his stuff sounds like it's been made in a fucking toilet in the shed at the back garden. Yeah. But you can fucking whap it up to full level and it's bumping, you know?
It's a balancing act, isn't it?
Yeah. So I didn't really know how to do that well. So he helped me a lot in that context, Joe did. He did engineer some of our stuff that we did a radio session, which BBC, I wouldn't say the BBC messed it up, but we were meant to go into one of the BBC studios to record it, and something happened and they couldn't do it. And they knew we were in Miami, obviously, and they knew, you know, there was a studio there, and they knew Joe was there. And they said, look, can you get Joe to do it? Like, and we were like, yeah, I'm sure he'll do it. So he helped us out with things like that as well. Yeah, he's a big help. He taught me a lot. On how to, you know, he taught me more on how to engineer in that context than I learned, you know, in 91, 92 in university. So again, just another leap in music making lessons, I guess. So Get a Life was an amalgamation of about maybe 2 years ish of jams and stuff that we were doing with the boys. But when we were doing it, we weren't like, right, this is an album, we're going to release this. We were just making tracks similarly to what we did leading up to Wonky Heads.
Sure.
And then, because we didn't know we were going to get the Zebra Traffic deal, I weren't even sure, if I'm honest with you, if Mighty Am was going to release anything beyond Funky Fresh as an album. Because we had distribution with Pinnacle, with both of them, with Absurdisms and with Funky Fresh, but they, Roger and Di, who owned Mighty Am, they didn't want to press like 5,000-10,000, you know, copies. So we only had a couple of thousand copies pressed of each of them. And the 7-inch, I'm sure the Funky Fresh 7-inch, they paid for CD, obviously, as a label, but because we wanted a vinyl, we didn't just want a CD release. You know, still to this day obsessed with vinyl, but I think we paid for the single, or we at least hugely chipped in towards them. So we had like 2,000 CDs pressed, and I think we only had like 500 singles pressed ourselves, or we chipped in the most part for the singles, the 7 inches. So I think that led me to really believe or think that there was no way they were going to release an album, because Mighty Am, you know, they were a rock label or whatever, and yes, I was working with them, and yes, but I knew Di and Roger, they wanted to be millionaires, you know, they wanted to be millionaire record label owners, you know, there's no two ways about it. And, you know, by that point, they'd realized that we were an underground hardcore hip hop band, and we, you know, especially by turning down, well, I didn't even turn down the deal. Roger turned it down for us, and I gave him a wink and a nod and said, nice one. I said, look, you know me enough to know, and I would have just stuck my 2 fingers up to him if they didn't give us full artistic rights. So you knew me enough to know, you know, we were the no sellout boys and all that, and just said, nah, it's not going to fucking happen. So that as well, I think, you know, me knowing about that and thinking they're not going to release an album for us. So when that Zebra Traffic thing came along, you know, obviously we were fucking over the moon, you know, we were buzzing, you know, even though it wasn't, it was American and UK publishing, so it wasn't worldwide publishing. It wasn't like in parts of Europe and Australia and all this and all that, even though our album somehow got there. You know, we had people take photos in record shops and say, fucking albums, you're in Melbourne, like, I'm like, fucking hell. I think Kazakhstan, our album was in one shop as well. Some guy was out there or somewhere out that way. Like, I was like, what the fuck? yeah, I just look at a photo of it. He said, look, I just come to, I'm sure it was not Kazakhstan, somewhere like that, you know, Pakistan or somewhere like that. And Wonky Heads and was there, like, I was like, that's bonkers, man. So that it goes to show Pinnacle did a good job in the sense that they did get it, you know.
It travelled.
Yeah, I travelled. I couldn't care if it was like only 2 copies in Pakistan. Just the fact that it got there, I was quite impressed. Most artists who get too big, see, they don't look at little things like that and think, fuck, man, that's amazing. It just goes over their head. But every single thing like that, I'm so proud of, you know.
By this point, you're smashing a live circuit. You're doing a lot of live shows around the country. There's a lot of this sort of newfound focus of stability you're forging. Can you talk about Higher Learning as a watershed moment where anyone into hip hop in Wales could find themselves?
Well, Higher Learning, like the Cardiff nights. I got to be honest with you. Higher Learning is the one that sticks in my mind the most, but I know there was other ones that we did, that we were, that we played at or hooked up with or whatever. But that is the one that I remember. When people say, "Oh, Cardiff nights," I'm like, Higher Learning. But there was others, wasn't there? There was definitely others because we played at others. It wasn't just Higher Learning, because Higher Learning was in a 2-gun, predominantly. I'm not sure if Higher Learning did the Ivor Bar Club. I'm not sure. So, or whether they
moved a couple of times.
Yeah, they moved a couple of times during there. But there was other nights as well, and I can't remember what other nights there were. But the Higher Learning ones, not just the ones that we played at. We'd always see a flyer for Higher Learning. This act playing, that act playing, that act playing. So, so they were in Cardiff. What Space were in Swansea. So yes, there was other little nights like. There was a kind of shakedown and whatever in Swansea. But if anyone was to ask, any good hip hop nights in Swansea with gigs, bands, people coming from away, it would always like space. And then same for Cardiff. Any other action, Higher Learning. And that's how we got to meet, obviously Kaptin and Dregs and all them boys. Like, obviously we'd met Matt and Cuz way before then, and they had knew them boys. I'd heard of Sure Shot. Is it Dregs' first sort of act? Is it like early 90s or whatever?
Yeah, that's
poppy,
right.
Like a poppy rap act or whatever. I've heard of them, but I'd never heard them. And they won some competition, didn't they, or something themselves on TV or whatever.
Right.
But other than that, when we first met Dregs and Kaptin and all them, was Higher Learning. That's how that night and the organisers of that night and everyone involved in that night was like those community centres in the Bronx and shit like that. It was bringing people together from Newport, from Swansea, from Cardiff, and and that's the other thing as well. From Swansea, there's a lot of people around us. Not necessarily mates, maybe associates more than anything else, that were heavily into football. And of course, certainly back then, it happens now, I guess, but certainly back then, they fucking hated Swansea and Cardiff hated Swansea and Swansea hated Cardiff and all that shit. I mean, we just look at people and go, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, are you fucking real? Are you on this planet? It's a bit of leather kicking on the field and you fucking hate that city that's in our own country because of that. Are you real? Are you fucking serious? So we hated that. So any confrontation in that respect, which did happen once or twice when we were in Cardiff, but not from hip hoppers, just from some twat that had gone to the club that sort of didn't mind hip hop, but was pissed. But he was a football lad,
Yeah.
Oh, you fucking Swansea boys, you fucking. And every fucking time, the Cardiff boys were always there going, "Oh, fuck off." This isn't about fucking football, mate. This is about hip hop, yeah? Hip hop brings people together, I never forget. And I can't remember who specifically. But I do remember Cardiff Edge sticking up for us. Not that we really needed it, because we could look after ourselves, but we didn't want to fight people for that, But it was nice to have that family unit back us up, I know we've got like what they call Blue City Cardiff rappers now, and and what have you, and obviously just very football oriented and stuff like that. But I can't imagine even them, getting on that fighty football hooligan shit. You know what I mean? It's just they're proud of Cardiff, and that's cool. That's cool with me. It's like, it's silly, man, and it just football breaks people apart though and brings people together, I think. Whereas hip hop brings people together, So yeah, we've always done our early stuff from wonky years in Cardiff. Not just at our live gigs, we used to go up to higher learning nights, and even when we weren't playing, just to go and see the acts and hang out and stuff. Higher learning to me was like when we were in Bristol, the cozies of Bristol. It brought all the graph artists, the breakers, the fucking MCs, the DJs together. The people who were into that culture. So that's how I remember higher learning. It being a central base of love for hip hop from wherever you were in Wales. And of course, I'm sure people from England come down as well. But it was our Welsh base.
It was a bridge for the culture, wasn't it?
Yeah,
It
totally.
truly was a meeting point. Those Headcase higher learning shows elevated your name so much back then.
Yeah, the flyers we've got for them, and we did do a couple of higher learning nights in the Ivor Bar Club. I think one of them was with Rough Intellect, which were West Wales boys that we did stuff with, and that was in the Ivor Bar Club. So yeah, they did shift around from the Toucan to the Ivor Bar. But fuck, man, I remember them in detail those nights. I loved it. I really did love it. It's just you can't replace those nights again. It's just, which is quite unfortunate, really. But I absolutely loved it, and I really do miss it as well. It's almost scary that it's not going to be the same again.
I remember those shows being almost theatrical-esque in a way. You would insert men that would come out between songs.
Well, our skit men, yeah. We'd always, because to me. Well, and to us, but to me, being again a driving force to a degree. I mean, I not like a movie or theatre set where I would be the director, because we'd all suggest shit. I mean, I didn't say to Nobs to put a fucking tutu on, that's just what he fucking liked doing. He likes doing his thing in that way. So a lot of the things that we incorporated with either personal ideas that we come up with ourselves, but as a set and what we would do, I would be more the look, let's not lose the plot, let's keep this as a visual show. Otherwise it could easily fall apart. I suppose that's that comes from me with the organization of having to learn through the music industry and knowing that it at least needs some kind of order. Because if it hasn't got any order, things start branching off in all directions. And before you know it, it's a fucking mess. So we would put these little show ideas together, and like I said, Jez was just a mate, certainly by that point, and DJ was long gone. He just loved hip hop. Look, man, I'm like, look, you were such a lovely, nice, soft, gentle guy, but you're funny as fuck, man. You up for doing a little, skit on the show? And he's like, yeah, but I can't rap. And I said, no, just do something funny. I don't know, dress up as a farmer and shag a sheep in between or something, which he did in Sheffield. And everyone was, Gunshot talked about that, and the one where I spat the maggots over the crowd, but which the club owner weren't too happy about. But yeah,
I heard about that story. Tell that story.
Just hooked up with the Sheffield boys, and we hadn't even pre-planned this. We were walking around, and we walked past a fishing shop, and bearing in mind, I've been veggie since I was a teenager. I had been meeting them, so this was quite a daring thing for me to do. But so we walked past a fishing shop, and we're all there, buzzing off the fact we're going to play the boardwalk with the Red Eye Knights and stuff like that up in Sheffield, and I think it might have been charged. Someone just dropped the hint. Oh, go in there, Slice, and fucking eat some maggots, And I'm like, fuck off. And so I went in and bought the maggots, and in this fishing shop, and throughout the entire afternoon, but I'm carrying them around. The idea comes out in my head, and of course, Andy and the boys from Red Nights are like, oh, I don't know if that's a good idea, mine. And so I just kept this stung and put them in my bag. But at the end of the show, and of course, when you're on stage and you buzz in, your adrenaline is going through the roof. Especially if you've got a massive crowd there and everyone's loving it. And of course, I just did it spontaneously. Just got about and just said, maggots, and everyone was laughing like fucking, not knowing what I was going to do with them. I just did it. it wasn't planned. You know, it wasn't like, yeah, I'm gonna spit maggots over the crowd. It's just like I knew maggots. I knew everyone would be like, you know. So I just did it like off the top of my fucking head, and of course they kicked us out of the club. We'd finished the set. That was the end of the set. But I say they kicked us out. The owner came running up. Who the fuck's part of maggots? Who the fuck's part of maggots? And by which point I was already out the back door, and I came back up. One of the boys online mentioned it when I posted a picture recently, and he said, "Yeah," he said the club owner was. I said, "Yeah, but that doesn't matter because the club was buzzing a few weeks later when they all hatched."
Wow.
Yeah, but Billy, what's his name? Billy Blue, or something like that. Not one a gunshot, as in Mercury, Whitechild Ricks, or what's the other member? Not the three, but Barry Blue. That's it. They had a crew. You know, like we had Eggsy, and then we had like fucking F, and you know they had a crew as well who'd do like side other stuff, other hip hop, whatever. So it was Barry Blue. He was there. We didn't know this. We only knew this because fucking it just word of mouth got through the. I think it was in an article somewhere. Someone wrote, Barry Blue will never forget the night where Headcase was in Sheffield and he spat maggots over the crowd. So yeah, we would name check in such fucking weird and fucked up ways for the UK. Maybe that's another reason why people just thought we were fucking bonkers, you know?
When you look at your contributions so far, what strikes you the most?
Originality through turntablism, I think. I'd like to think anyway. Going back to what I was saying earlier on, where I was never a battle DJ, you know? There might have been a little bubble of a moment when I was younger where, you know, situations arose in Swansea where it's like, yeah, it was battlist. And yes, you know, I really do appreciate within hip hop that was a massive part of hip hop's early, you know, well, it still is really, like, but certainly more so in the 80s. In hip hop's essence was a lot of battling, and you know, not just battling in the room or in a club, but on record, you know, you like Tila Rock. All of Tila Rock stuff is like, you know, back to burn, or I'm going to burn you out, you know, I'm going to burn you. It was all about being the better rapper or being this and being that, but not because they would have ever, like, unlike Gangster was, not because they would never have, you know, hooked up with them people and then threatened to fucking kill them, you know, within the room and all that. It's because everyone in hip hop in that era knew that by doing that, all you're going to do is elevate the culture more by making someone else do better than you just did. You know what I mean? So they would still hook up in the room and still hug and say, man, whoa, I know, you just blew me away. Amazing. And then that guy would go away and go, you know what? I'm going to blow him away next month. And he would make himself better, or he would advance himself, or try new, and rapping, DJing, graffiti. It's through the entire hip hop culture. So for me, I was never a battle DJ. So my battle, if you want to call it that, or my part of like come battle me like this then, which nobody could ever do as far as I'm concerned. And if they can, I'll shout out to you all now who's listening to this now. If any of you can do what I did within Goatboy and Headcase with the records, flipping 15 records in a matter of fucking 1 minute on a stage, well, I had to pick like 7 breaks off one record and I had 15 records. So what's that? 78 fucking breaks. And I had to flip those records over in a matter of seconds. And none of them were hip hop breaks. They were all off fucking like Talking Heads, you know, Madness, Jimi Hendrix, all these other things, and all these other records. Virtually, I won't say none, but virtually no hip hop breaks. You know, it was all other musical stuff, and you know, some of it was blended in with the music, the guitars, the piano, whatever, to make it sound like it was that. And others were me cutting a guitar when it was obvious I was cutting a guitar. So I think that, and I think mainly because everything else I've done within hip hop, other people have done. You know, it's been done over and over and over again, and I am, you know, proud of all that as well. But the one thing I've done that nobody else has done that I can look back and say, you know, I did push myself to do that, even though I didn't know it would work. And I know, and it does. And it, you know, I suppose to a certain degree, it's not sad, but I was a bit perturbed by the fact that nobody's ever mentioned that to me. Nobody's ever turned around and said, you know what you did with the decks, fuck man, wow, you know. I don't expect that. I'm still humble by it, and I still know what I've done. And if someone could come forward and say that they did it too, I'd appreciate that, because I'd like to hear. I did look for stuff like that. I did look through hip hop and also funk, alternative, sounding stuff to see if people were doing. I didn't just do it like, oh, I'm going to do this because no one's done it. I did hunt for that. I thought, fucking, well, why isn't anybody using, hip hop in this context? I'm talking about not wonky heads, because all of them, most of them days, at least to a certain degree, was using sort of hip hop cuts or whatever. I'm talking about mainly from Goatboy onwards, but still, the creating of the first, the early stuff, leading up to wonky heads, 4-second sampler, and people don't believe me. I made virtually that entire album on a 4-second sampler. But I used to take one, if you'd sample a noise, that noise might not necessarily be 1 second long. It might just, if a second is like ding, 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 I might just sample the ding, ding. And then I'll take the end of that second, so half a second and another half a second, and then flip it backwards, and then take the end of the loop, flip it backwards, and then attach it to the other loop, which would make the 1 second loop completely different. And then it's hard to explain, but because that's all the equipment we had, until we went into grassroots and we added some bits and bobs on top. But virtually that entire album was made on a 4-second sampler. So I'm kind of proud of that as well, because everyone was out there with their Akai 950s and shit, and we just couldn't. Well, we could afford it, but we had to make a choice. It's like, right, do we get that? And then we can't get a mic, and we can't get this, and we can't get that. When we've already got this,
right
now we can get you a mic, and to I had to ascertain what was the best thing to break down for us to get in order for us to make shit, because we could have easily made the wrong mistake with the money we had and actually not ended up making anything, So I just stuck with a 4-second sampler and an STE Atari with Cubase on it, The old Ataris, most people used STs, but the STE was the top end model where you can actually fully kit the memory out, whereas the STs you couldn't. So it was just a sequencer, it was not, it wasn't, the music wasn't in there. It was just, we were just able to sequence more tracks through that 4-second sampler, which is why I was able to snip, a quarter of a second off and put it on one track, and then another, half a second and another quarter of a second and put another track. So we'd make like 12 tracks from 4 seconds. So because they would overlap, and like one would have a and another one would have a that's all like quarter of a second. And of course, when you got like 15 tracks of that becomes a track. So I don't think I heard anybody doing that either, back then. And that was like early 90s. That was the early 90s, late 80s, well, early 90s, because we didn't have the sample of the 80s, but so early 90s, like, yeah. So those two moments, the DJing, that's what I would look at my life in hip hop and be really proud of, is the fact that I never really used, hip hop records per se. I did do shit my own way, and the same with the sampling and the producing. I don't know to a total degree, but I do know Public Enemy or Hank Shockley. Me and Hank Shockley had a long chat about this. Keith Shockley, had a long chat about this outside one of the concerts. I had a picture taken with him, and then me being me, I'm like, let's have a chat, man. And he's like, I got to go back. No, come on, let's have a chat. I got to fucking talk to you about something. And I just don't leave stuff go, or I never used to as much, certainly. You don't get anywhere if you don't push, If you don't push, people will just like, I can't, man, or I do this. I want to know the reason why you can't, like. So, not tactless. Certainly, I had my tact, I had my moments when I go, hats off, I appreciate that, no worries. But a lot of the time, I was very, very fucking pushy, because you just don't get what you want otherwise, or what you feel you need. So I had a long chat with Keith Shockley about how the early Public Enemy stuff was created, and he was saying, we used to dig stuff out of skips, man. We just didn't have any money, So I dig stuff out of skips and a broken drum machine or whatever, and we just fix it. And it wouldn't work like it would work like you bought it from the shop, but it would work in a way that worked for us. You know what I mean? which is how they created Yo Bum Rush Show and all that, you know. It's all created on junk fucking toys and stuff. So that, you know, I was like, you know, even though he told me that, I had a bit of a hint of that from the early career anyway, but that wasn't what necessarily made me stick with the 4-second sampler. It's just because it was just practical because of what we had and the lifestyle we had, and we weren't fucking loaded. Just thought, look, if it works and we can get it to work, let's just get every little ounce out of this that we can. And if I'm honest with you, if it was a bigger sampler or if it was cleaner and all these, we wouldn't have been who we were. You know, we wouldn't have gone down the road we went. We wouldn't have probably wouldn't have been as original. And same with Public Enemy and the Yo Bum Rush Show album. You know, if that was made, you know, too clean and all that, it wouldn't have had the effect that Yo Bum Rush Show had. You know, so those things are quite pivotal to me in over every single thing in my career. Is what I've done anyway. It was I've taken nothing and made something out of it. You know.
What's up, everybody? Eggsy here from Goldie Looking Chain, just dropping in to talk about some memories because I'm an old man now. I've got no one else to share them with. I want to talk now about the Headcase Ladz, DJ Slicer. You know, that is, again, within the realms of Welsh hip hop, something that was right there back in the day for us, you know, during our era. Funny, really funny guys, really slick shows, amazing, you know, and when we got to experience seeing them, you know, back in the day when we're doing early gigs and stuff, to be on the same bill as them, to be involved in that was brilliant, because when you take it outside of Newport or Wales or England, people sort of know about our band because we were lucky enough to get signed to a major label, and it sort of pushed us out everywhere. But things like the Headcase Ladz, DJ Slicer, you know, equally as good, you know, they deserve more recognition than they got. You know, someone should have put loads of money behind them and put them on a tour bus and forced them to travel for hours and hours and the world sweating in front of people. But it's really nice to know that there's other stuff going on. You know, I think with hip hop in general, it can happen that a craze or a certain style happens, and then everybody jumps on it, and then everybody starts copying each other. People may look at our two acts and say, yeah, that one of them's ripping the other one off. Maybe that's complete rubbish. It's people with in exactly the same pace, people in exactly the same place, with the same mentality and the same love of hip hop doing something. And I think that's what's lovely about it. Is it wasn't, there could have been a competition there. You know, they could have been saying, oh, that stuff you did isn't as good. It's just, but that's not what it's about. We just sort of saw each other, and it was love at first sight. I didn't want to kiss them or anything. Not there's nothing wrong with that. It's the 21st century. You can do what you like. I'm just not into kissing other rappers, you know.
What's up? My name's EG Demo. DJ from Swansea since 1985. And one thing I'll say about DJ Slicer or Dek Masha Slicer or Steve would be that up until he came out with that vision of Headcase, and where everything hasn't got to be perfect and, you know, polished and on point, because you know, up until that time, if your breath control was off, or you know, cadence was off, or you know, things like that, there was very few people could get away with it in hip hop. Period, regardless UK or US or wherever. One thing that I would say, Headcase Ladz Slicer Man, obviously as a driver, and Headcase as a whole, sort of showed me was that we could be who we are, if that makes sense. You know, we didn't have to emulate at all, or disguise what we was doing, you know, whether it be accent or flow, cadence, scratches even, you know. Because, you know, Slicer has his own style, which fitted the wonky music way of life perfectly. You know, it wasn't my style and what I doing, and I was more battle orientated, DMC routine, practiced, that type of thing, you know.
I'm Andy Cowan, former editor of Hip Hop Connection magazine. Headcase Lads were unique. They really changed the expectations of Welsh hip hop, really upped the ante, if you like. And both Slicer Man and Nobster Nuts were great stylists. Really think Slicer Man's beats were one of a kind, really inventive, very creative. He had a very otherworldly production style, laced with psychedelic kinks, odd noises floating in and out of a mix, not to mention a large chunk of good old-fashioned wiki scratching and stuff. It's a real sample manipulator, not drawing from the obvious sources. You had to sort of hunt around to really find out those obscure breaks and the old funk and rock ephemera he really dipped into on tracks like If I Had a Hammer or Funky Fresh. As a producer, totally, utterly and seriously underrated. Nuts, it's very much the same case. I would say, he was both funky and funny, really had a really distinctive and heavy Swansea accent. And I think most people who hadn't heard Welsh hip hop before Headcase Lads would be surprised at how well his accent worked with hip hop. It really gelled. He had a sort of lazy sounding style, which sort of disguised, almost camouflaged his more serious skills and some very good lyrics. But it's the style itself that really wins. The pitch of his voice, in some songs he sounds like he's struggling to breathe, but it really, only adds charm. And lyrically, he was a genius at finding, the absurd in virtually any situation. A great gift for harnessing colloquialisms and using them to his own ends. The other thing about Headcase Lads is I really like the way that they paved the way for another generation of MCs to really come through, from Swansea, from a locale. So, Shonky, Fog Scratch Your Leg, which I think was an early name for Junior Disprol, Little Miss and DJ Cuz, all featured on the debut. They were opening the curtain just a little to show what was around in the big world beyond. I think Headcase Lads probably summed up themselves on Wonky Head, on the sleeve notes where they wrote, "Ask yourself what's wrong with being original," and the answer, of course, is absolutely nothing.
Hi, this is DJ Cuz, and you're listening to Hip Hop Cymru Wales. So, talking about my experience in the mid to late 90s with the Headcase Lads and the recording of their first album, Wonky Heads, and I spent quite a bit of time in the studio just hanging out with those guys during the recording of that album, and it was a very exciting time, fantastic time to watch this album being created. Slice's production was just mind-blowing. Even to this day, if I listen back, I still don't know how he made some of those beats. It was fantastic, and in hindsight, I wish I'd paid a bit more attention and learned a bit more from Slice in regards to production back then. But it was quite difficult when you just had the energy of Nobster Nuts and his crazy hip hop MCing style, just running around the studio, and it was, like I said, it was an exciting time. So Slice, what I think Slice brought to the table was the rawness of the old Britcore hip hop, along with his own element of wonkiness, just weird and wonderful samples, sample choice, and how he flipped them, his use of effects was fantastic as well, and it just worked. It all sounded like one cohesive piece of work, which is quite a thing to achieve back then. Regards to Slice on the turntables, I mean, he's the Dek Masha. He was ruthless. He was brutal with his cuts, so razor sharp with his scratching. So yeah, I feel very, very privileged. I got great memories of back then watching those guys, and the dynamic between Slice and Nobster was just unbelievable. You had Slice pushing the project forward. Nothing was going to stop that album from being made. And then you had Nobster, who was just like, very, very skillful, unique. No one could judge Nobster's lyrical abilities. He was fantastic. But he was also murder as well. Being honest, I'm sure you wouldn't mind me saying, he was murder for Slice to get some of the work done. Headcase Ladz, Wonky Heads, and I was privileged enough that Slice and Nobster asked me to contribute to that album. So I made a beat one day, and I took it to those guys. They played it, and they liked it. And Nobster said, "Give me a couple of days." And a week later, he rocked up to my flat and said, "Right, okay, I'm good to record this song. We're going to call it The Knicker Thief." And I was like, "Yeah, cool, let's do it." So Nobster actually made up a story about a man who just got released from prison because he couldn't stop. He had a problem with pinching women's lingerie. His name was Cyril Gusset, and that was the story of the song, The Knicker Thief. And I remember the day of recording that song in Grassroots, and Slice had come in to do some ad-libs as well, and turned it into kind of a news report. There was a man had just broken out of jail, and this, that, and the other, and it was hilarious, and it fitted right in with the whole concept of Wonky Heads, even down to the artwork of the album, which was done by Slice. That was a unique, monumental album in Welsh hip hop for sure, and it was great to be a part of it.
Yes, people. This is Captain Barrett. Huge love and respect for Slicer Man. Really happy that people get to hear some of his stories and hear some of this history, because he goes deeper than most. I mean, I first heard Headcase Ladz around 98 through DJ Cuz down there at Grassroots. They were recording what must have been either Wonky Heads or maybe the Shonky stuff. What I heard totally blew me away. It didn't sound like anything else I'd ever heard before. 100% unique. Nobody on this planet can copy that, because it's about as real as it can get. It's not just a musical approach either. It's everything from the artwork to the humour. There's bits of Cheech and Chong, Fabulous Fairy, Freak Brothers, Spike Milligan, all of that in there, but in the most Swansea and hip-hop way. And I think it takes someone like Slicer, who's very intelligent, very passionate, but also gives absolutely no fucks, to truly have the balls to put something like that out there. And to be honest, we are all massively better off for it. So yes, much love to Nobster Nuts, Loose Tunes, all the crew, and a huge big up to the one and only Dek Masha Slice.